Welcome back to the Rodcast. It is the Hump Day edition of the Rodcast. Thank you guys for joining us. A lot to get into. The college football playoff rankings, the first college football playoff rankings of the college football season are out. We'll get into that, talk about where the Longhorns stand. We'll get into some other college football discussion because we'll go behind the burnt orange curtain and talk some Texas, Florida, but also give you updates. There's an injury update, another one on the Florida side. We'll get to breaking down that matchup a little bit too, talking about what Texas hopes to achieve coming off the bye week. So a lot of college football and Texas football to discuss. Also, we'll get into NFL news, notes, and nuggets. Yesterday, the trade deadline for the NFL. We'll discuss the what I call the NBAification of the NFL. It continues with all the trades that we saw. So we'll get into the winners and the losers of the NFL trade deadline. We'll also get into some discussion about the upcoming NFL draft. There's a position that is supposed to be plentiful in this upcoming draft, and actually the University of Texas has a lot to do with that. We'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on in the show. We got your usual favorites, of course. We got Raj Rant. We got Who Said That. We got Off the Record. We got the What the Facts, What the Stats. Of course, your topic for the big fat poll of the day as well. We are loaded on a Hump Day edition of the Rodcast, and we appreciate you guys joining us. Before we do any of that, let's introduce you to the rest of the crew. He's one of the hardest working members of the ARN family. Got a hustler spirit, period. Not sure what he's paid, but pretty damn sure the man is underpaid. Ain't no 401k for this hustler, and he's a hustle man of many talents. It is our friend, co-host, and neighbor. It's Patrick Davis, y'all. What's going on, Patrick? How you doing, brother?
Oh, just living the dream over here. We got a little bit of cold weather this morning. It was
nippy.
Had to put on the hoodie when I left the house this morning because it was a little bit colder than I thought it normally was. So we had to get that done. But just getting ready for it here on a Wednesday. I got weird Spurs news yesterday. That was
weird Spurs news.
Well, they announced yesterday that Jeremy Sohan's going to be out like a month or so with a broken thumb. But the main thing is, I'm not a Jeremy Sohan fan. He's a guy I did not want him to draft. I've not been a fan of his since he's been on the team. Not a fan of how he plays basketball. Not a fan of a lot of things about him. But so I'm happy he is not playing right now because he's annoying even when I just watch the games. But also they need everybody they have. So it's kind of that back and forth where you're like, well, I just wanted you to trade him, not for him to get hurt. I need you to get rid of him. Actually, is what I'm looking for, not necessarily the injury. But we'll see how it goes in the next month or so without him. Maybe they'll say, okay, we can move on now. It's clearly who needs you. Go get somebody else. So go with that. Let me introduce you to my co-host. He's a proud alumni of DBU. He's got more papers than Dunder Mifflin and watches more film than Siskel and Ebert. He is a new Rod, father of Austin Sports Radio, Mr. Rod Babers.
Appreciate the intro as always. We'll get to the trade deadline discussion, of course, in the NFL. The Cowboys did make a move. We talked about that yesterday. We'll discuss that a little bit more too. Texans actually made a move, very minor move. It almost was an irrelevant move for the Texans, but we'll talk about that too. We'll dive into both Texans and the Cowboys and their matchups coming up this weekend a little bit because both have big matchups. Texans face off against the Detroit Lions. That is that's a juggernaut. You can make the argument nobody's playing better than Detroit right now. I know the Kansas City's still undefeated, but you can make the argument nobody's playing better football than the Detroit Lions. So tough time for the Texans to meet up with them. No news yet on Nico Collins. They've been very hush-hush on whether Nico's going to return this week or not. So haven't heard much about that. Maybe today you start hearing some news reports trickling out about that, but that's big. I mean, I don't think I'm picking the Texans regardless in this game, but how they perform against and measure up against one of the best teams in the league. I think a lot of that could be, it definitely could be helped if Nico Collins is available for the Texans. We'll talk about that. And of course, the Cowboys got a big divisional matchup. Nobody's talking about anything on the field related by the Cowboys. We've kind of given up on that because Dak Prescott looks like he's going to be hitting the IR for a while, but they got to face the Philadelphia Eagles, who are playing some of their best football right now. Actually, they're playing their best football so far of the season. Some people feel like they finally started to figure out the Kellen Moore offense. And then there's that tie because Kellen Moore knows a lot about this Cowboys team. And I'm sure he's looking for revenge. There's a revenge factor there. So not a good week for the Cowboys. We'll talk about that a little bit too as the show goes on. Of course, we'll get you your Horn headlines. We know the big topic of conversation, of course, in this country is that Donald Trump will get a second term. I'll just say this: we don't talk a lot of politics on the show. All right, purposefully, we don't get into it. And so we don't make political opinions. I don't really give those a show, but I make predictions and all types of things. Looking at trends, I said in July, I was like, it's done. I told you guys in July. I didn't talk about it after that, but I told you guys July after he survived an assassination attempt. I said, guys, it's done. It's over. That's just the reality of it. Whether you like it or not, I mean, he was a populist president, meaning a celebrity president, basically. And we vote on we like storylines and celebrities. That wasn't a better storyline than somebody surviving an assassination attempt. Just not. And from that point on, I was like, yep, I think he's going to win. I don't know who you're going to put up against him. Doesn't matter. And they changed candidates, but it didn't matter. I mean, and I haven't looked at all the numbers, but it seems like it was kind of a runaway victory for President Trump in his second term. So that was just my prediction on it, just watching the trends. Wasn't looking at, that's not my political opinion. That was just an observation. And I think my observation was correct, period. It's just, we don't, people talk about policies and politics. And I know, and the facts, that matters less and less. People vote how they feel, not really about facts. And he made America feel better about itself. You can say what you want, but that is what, that you have to evoke, those types of emotions. And he did a better job of it than the other side. So I figured that in like July. I know a lot of people think that the country is doomed if either side had won. I get that. I understand people are passionate about that. I don't necessarily feel like that. I think the country is, I talk to people every day, full of a lot of good people. I think, the country's going to be fine either way. Hopefully we can kind of come together regardless of which side of this election you're on. But yeah, I didn't think it was going to be close. I told you guys, July, I was like, it's over. I don't talk politics on the show. You guys know that. I just give you observations. I told you guys, I was like, guys, it's done. It's done. If it's about storylines and it's about celebrity and it's about how people feel, not about facts and figures, man, it's a done deal. So there you go. That's my take on the election. But like I said, I gave you my take on it back in July. I think that was like mid-July when that happened. Came in, I was like, oh, guys, it's done. You don't get a better story than that. Give me a better storyline than that. Do you have one? Nope. And images are powerful. There's the image of him on stage, blood on his face or whatever, and the fist in the air. Images are powerful, guys. They are. They're powerful. Think about the image of Sam Ellinger by himself with the eyes of Texas and what that did to light a fire on one fans and how, passionate everybody got just about that image. Images are powerful. All right. Just throwing it out there. All right. Let's get back to it. Let's get into some Texas football discussion because we got to talk about the college football playoff rankings. We'll also get into some NFL trade winners and losers. We'll do that too. But first, let's get you educated, updated, and informed with all the top stories of the day with Patrick Davis and the Horn Headlines.
All right, your Horn Headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the NBA, the Mavericks take on the Bulls tonight with P.J. Washington out with a right knee sprain, and Derek Lively is a game-time decision with a shoulder injury. The Spurs will take on the Rockets in Houston after the Spurs announced yesterday that Jeremy Sohan will miss several weeks with a broken thumb that will require surgery. In the NFL, the trade deadline passed yesterday with a few moves being completed. Edge Zadarius Smith was traded from the Browns to the Lions for a 5th and 6th round pick. The Bengals acquired running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears for a 7th-round pick. The Saints sent 4-time Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore and a 5th-round pick to the Commanders for a 3rd, 4th, and 6th-round pick. The Steelers added Mike Williams from the Jets for a 5th-round pick and edge Preston Smith from the Packers for a 7th. The Ravens get cornerback help from Tre'Davious White from the Rams in a 7th-round pick swap. The Texans sent D-tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for a 7th, and the Cowboys added second-year receiver Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers for a 4th-round pick. And in college football, the first college football poll was released last night with Oregon coming in at number 1, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Texas at number 5. And that is your Horn Headlines.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for the Horn Headlines. Let's start with the college football playoff rankings. The Longhorns found themselves at number 5 in the first college football playoff rankings of the season. And it looks like, based on the college football playoff rankings as they stand right now, Oregon at number 1, Ohio State 2 at 7-1. Of course, Oregon is undefeated. Ohio State 2 at 7-1. Georgia number 3 at 7-1. Miami 9-0 is at number 4. Texas 7-1 at number 5. Penn State 7-1 at 6. Tennessee is number 7, also at 7-1. Indiana 9-0 at number 8. You got BYU at number 9, even though they're 8-0. Notre Dame is 7-1 there at number 10. Alabama 6-2 at number 11. Only 2-loss team to actually make the top 12 here. And then Boise State at 7-1. Right now, the lone representative for the group of conferences at number 12. The first team out is SMU. Group of team SMU at 8-1. SMU ACC. I apologize. At 8-1, and Texas A&M, they are the second team out at 14 at 7-2, and a lot of that because Texas A&M, they can settle that, of course, if they take care of business down the stretch. So Longhorns at number 5, and if it was being seeded today, they would essentially have the 6th seed. I think they would be playing Alabama basically, because based on these rankings, Georgia would be the team that ends up getting that bye, if you want to just throw it on the seeding. But of course, Texas handles business, and then Texas can determine their own fate too in the college football playoff rankings as in regards to them getting the bye. All right, winning the SEC title and winning the conference and getting the bye. But right now, just the way the standing go, just looking at seedings, they would probably end up being the 6th seed going up against 11 Alabama if you were breaking down a bracket, if you want to get into bracketology. But at 5, listen, none of this, ultimately right now doesn't matter as much because there's so much that's going to be obviously that's going to play out. And for the Longhorns, you're going to end up, if you take care of business, beat the Aggies, win out, you'll get to the SEC title game. And even if you lose the SEC title game, that is tough. You'd rather win it. But you lose the SEC title game, you're in. You're in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
If you take it, it doesn't matter. Now, the only way the loser of the SEC title game wouldn't be in if they already have 2 losses. They're pretty much telling you here, they're trying to keep, it's Alabama's the only 2-loss team that right now is in the top 12. They're telling you a few things here that definitely, they're going to have very few 2-loss teams. If you got 3 losses, you're definitely out. It's going to be almost impossible to make it with 3 losses. They're also telling you the SEC and the Big Ten are king. They both have 4 teams in. We talked about this. They were going to have 4 to 5 teams in. It's 4 teams right now for the Big Ten and for the SEC. 1 representative from the Big 12, that'd be BYU. 1 representative from Notre Dame has their own rules because it's Notre freaking Dame. 1 ACC selection, and then you would have the group of whatever selection, and that's Boise. So everybody else gets 1. You're the Big Ten, the SEC, you get 4. That's a statement, ladies and gentlemen. That's a statement. They're letting you know. That's where the kind of the power base is. Actually, I take that back. Big 12, because Big 12, they only got 1. Iowa State is on the outside looking in. Man, they dumped Iowa State. Ooh, I'm a little surprised. Iowa State got 1 loss, and they put them at 17. To finish out the ranking here, LSU is at 15. I told you the Aggies at 14, 7-2. LSU's at 15, 6-2. And they got Ole Miss at 7-2 at 16. Iowa State at 7-1 at 17. Pittsburgh at 18 at 7-1. They got K-State at 7-2 at 19. Colorado got the Buffaloes at number 20 at 6-2. Washington State's at 7-1. Louisville 6-3 at number 22. Clemson, I would say the shaky start, but Dabo's figured some things out. They're 6-2, and they are number 23. Missouri makes it at 6-2. I think Missouri's a fraud. I believed in them early on, but I've seen them play in bigger games this year and all their tough games this year, and they tend to disappoint me. So I'm not a fan. And Army is 8-0, and yet somehow behind all these 6-2 teams. So they're letting you know that as a independent, they don't really believe that Army is better than some of these teams in the group of 4, or the Power 4 conferences, or even some of the group of conferences as well too. So that's how the college football playoff ranking is laid out. The first college football playoff ranking. Notre Dame. Once again, Notre Dame has their own rules that apply to them. They're 7-1, and Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's good, then a 1 or a 2 loss team, they're gonna find a way to put Notre Dame in. Still think if Texas is a 2-loss team, they still make it. Texas is sexy enough, but not a guarantee depending on how everything shakes out in the college football playoff or in the SEC, I should say, down the stretch. So Longhorns at number 5. I like where the Longhorns sit. They're in the perfect spot, and down the stretch here for the Longhorns is looking more and more, especially looking at Florida and looking at Arkansas down the stretch too, that the Longhorns really, if they take care of business and they play to the standard that we talk about, the standard's the standard, the Longhorns should be fine, even against the Aggies. South Carolina showed you a pretty good blueprint how to neutralize the Aggies' offensive attack, even though it is pretty potent. They lost one of their best weapons in the backfield, Le'Veon Moss, for the season. That's unfortunate, but for Texas, that bodes well for you being able to corral that running attack. And if you can stop the rushing attack for the Aggies, they don't really have the ability to hurt you with Morris or Reed as a pocket passer. Maybe they'll throw Connor Wigman out there. Who knows? That's something you got to prepare for. But I think ultimately right now, I like the Longhorns' chances of winning out. I do. And making the SEC title game. Now, making the SEC title game, who you play, that's ultimately going to be left up to how Georgia plays down the stretch, because Georgia's got some big games coming up here down the stretch. Which we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but Georgia's schedule just not let up. Longhorns got a couple of tough games, but Georgia's got some monsters down the stretch here too. So we'll get into some college football discussion. Let's talk about the NFL trade deadline just for a second. We'll go behind the burn-ons curtain next segment and dive into Texas' upcoming opponent, the Florida Gators, and we'll get into a quote from Michael Taft. Turns out Michael Taft's got he's got some insider knowledge, got some inside information on the third string transfer quarterback from Yale, the walk-on quarterback from Yale that'll be right now projected to be the starter versus Texas. He's got some inside information on him. Love that Taft Daddy's doing his research. So we'll give you that coming up. We go behind the burn-ons curtain. We'll also talk about the offensive mojo for Texas. Remember, Sark talked about them losing their mojo. I got another theory as to what could be affecting that mojo. We'll talk about that when we go behind the burn-ons curtain, and the injury for Florida, or at least an injury update for Florida on the other side, which is going to make that offense a lot more predictable. So we'll talk about that too. But let's talk about the trade deadline. I've talked about this a bunch. The NBA-ification of the NFL. There's some things that the NFL is doing. Of course, they're the number one TV show in America. They like that the NBA, some things that the NBA does better than anybody else. And the way the NBA pumps up and promotes their trade deadline and the trades in the NBA, the NFL has always been jealous of that. They've always been a little bit jealous of how it's just such a high octane kind of feverish element to their sports calendar, where it can take over the sports headlines for a couple of days, especially if they are huge, big blockbuster trades. It can kind of take over the headlines for a few days, and the NFL is a little bit jealous of the NBA's ability to do that. They've always tried to infringe on what the NBA does well. Remember, NBA owned Christmas on the sports calendar. NFL, hey, no, we're going to take Christmas. We like the way you do that. Hey, we see that you have done a great job of cultivating that as a part of your sports calendar. We want to infringe on that. And they want to take the recipe that the NBA has with their trade deadline. And that's why the NFL initially moved their trade deadline, because they wanted to incentivize teams to trade more. Like I said, the NBA-ification of the NFL. Well, it's worked. There were 18, and Adam Schefter said there were 19. But according to David Bierman of Pro Football Network, he's been tracking it. He said there were 18. Adam Schefter, said there were 19. But either way, that since October 1st, basically, there have been 18 or 19 trades made between NFL teams. According to Bierman of Pro Football Network, who tracks the trades closely, that is the second most in that time frame in NFL history, coming behind 2022 when there were 21 trades that were made. And of course, the old deadline was in place in 2022. So it looks like more and more teams have been incentivized to make some of these moves. And I think the winners basically are the teams who've already, I think, ascended and separated from the rest of the league. My big winners are Kansas City, Detroit. I think those are your biggest winners easily. because I like what Washington did. The Marshawn Lattimore deal
Yeah.
that came later in the day. That was a hell of a deal too. But Kansas City getting DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, come on, guys. There's no better. There's no move that was made that's going to be more beneficial, in my opinion, to any team than DeAndre Hopkins to that Kansas City offense. And I gave you the numbers yesterday, and we'll talk about it later on. He has ignited that Kansas City offense, and he has activated Kelsey and activated Patrick Mahomes. Scary thought when both of them were off to the slowest starts of their careers at Kansas City, even during the dynastic run. Now it looks like that offense may be on its way to being a high octane, prolific offense, which is a scary thought considering they're already undefeated, and they've had their struggles offensively. And at one point prior to DeAndre Hopkins getting there, Patrick Mahomes had more interceptions than touchdowns. Now he's starting to turn that around. A big part of that is having a true number one wide receiver. And then Detroit, who's the juggernaut right now in the NFC, we'll get a chance to talk about them because the Texans have to face that juggernaut. They end up getting an elite pass rusher, an alpha, if you will, that pass rusher into Darius Smith. So that was to them after losing Aiden Hutchinson. Now he's no Aiden Hutchinson. We'll give you those numbers a little bit later on, but he has proven throughout his time in the league that he's a guy that can be an elite pass rusher. Like he can be, maybe it's just situational, but he's got double-digit sacks in, I believe it's 3 out of the last 4 years where he's been able to play an entire season. That shows you. I mean, he's on his way to double-digit sacks anyway. I think he's got 5 so far this year. He's definitely going to end up, getting close to double-digit sacks, if not surpassing that. Aiden Hutchinson was the sack leader in the NFL when he went down. So, like I said, he's no replacement for Aiden Hutchinson. But all you need is a guy that can rush the pass. You don't need Aiden Hutchinson necessarily. It'd be great to have him. You don't necessarily need a guy that can be that impactful. You just need somebody who can provide that pass rushing element because your defense had to. You really had to pivot once you lost him because of his ability to provide pressure from multiple gaps, which Darius Smith can do too. But now you've had to blitz more with him out. You've had to take more chances with and really kind of take more chances, leaving your DBs out on the island for a little bit too long with him out and playing too much one-on-one because you're sending extra defenders. Was Darius Smith in there? You can kind of go back to your old model, or at least some of it, prior to Aiden Hutchinson's injury. So those are my 2 favorites. And my third might be Marshawn Lattimore to Washington. Washington had one hole, right? If you look at it, they had one of their big holes, I should say, was their cornerback spot. And they went and got one of the best corners in the league to fill the one void. And this is the frustration with Jerry Jones and the move that he made to trade for Jonathan Mingo. Nothing wrong with that. That is something the Cowboys needed to address. But the Cowboys are not a real contender. So the Cowboys probably shouldn't have made a move at all. But the move that they made was not to address the most glaring issues with the team right now. Yeah. It was a superficial move.
Well, no, and I think if you look at what the Ravens did over the last month, first bring in Deontay Johnson for a 5th, and the 5th they're giving up for what Deontay Johnson could get them in a compensatory pick if he leaves in the offseason would be probably around a 5th round compensatory. So not really giving up much for a Deontay Johnson if they decide to let him go. And if he plays well enough and they keep him, then great. You didn't give up much to get him either. And then they make the trade for Tre'Davious White from the Rams, bring in a cornerback there. They basically pick swap 7s for it. Yeah. So again, don't really give up anything to bring in a couple of guys that might help them, might not, but they're not losing anything in the process to make these trades. So I think when you look at that, you go, well, it's just kind of savvy that you're at least trying to fill these holes, but you're also, you're a little bit more careful about it. And so you go, okay, Jerry, I get if you don't want to, give up a lot of assets, that you're more worried that you want to keep draft picks. Then there's ways to still make trades and find guys that you can put in to help your roster. The Cowboys also cut 2 guys they had traded for earlier this year.
That's right. The D tackles, right? Jordan Phillips
and another, but they cut 2 D tackles as well.
Yeah.
Well,
that was good.
They need to. They weren't good tackles, but those were the trades you're making is for guys that aren't necessarily making an impact. And then you gave up a 5th for Mingo, or a 4th for Mingo, which seems really high. It seems high.
That is high. It is. That's considering the cost of the wide receivers that we have seen that have been traded so far, I would say that the cost is a little high for Jonathan Mingo. Unless, like I said, they really love him and he was really high on their board. I get that. But, man, we just saw guys like you saw Deontay Johnson, and I know Devontae Adams went for more, but hell, we just saw, DeAndre Hopkins. I was just talking about him. He just went for a 5th rounder, conditional 4th rounder. I said Cowboys are in a different position than the Kansas City Chiefs. I get that. We're just talking about value of the wide receiver position. Seems the Cowboys keep miscalculating the wide receiver market, in my opinion. So, I'm not surprised. They did the same thing with Amari Cooper 2 years ago, miscalculating the wide receiver
to trade for a guy that is not getting any snaps. That will most likely value only go down so you can get him at the trade deadline as opposed to at the end of the season, going into next year at the draft, and give up maybe a 6th or a 7th for him when the Panthers just want to get rid of him at that point.
Makes no sense.
That's why it doesn't make sense. I get you could say, well, we want him for the stretch, but I don't know if he's. I mean, he couldn't beat out anyone in Carolina. So I don't know. I just genuinely don't know how much you expect him to help you in the short term, and especially in the short term, in the fact that you're going to have Cooper Rush probably playing or Trey Lance for the next 4 weeks.
Agreed. No, I'm with you on that. Like I said, I don't understand what the Cowboys were thinking on that one. I just think they gave up too much. I like the move. They do need wide receiver help, especially with CeeDee Lamb's injury. But how they ended up giving up a 4th, I'm not sure how that happened. Considering, like we've talked about, DeAndre Hopkins basically went for a 5th. Deontay Johnson was basically a 5th. And I know all those moves happened before the Cowboys, so they weren't, they weren't necessarily in a position of, a leverage position, basically, in terms of negotiations, but because they really needed a wide receiver at that time. But I think they ended up paying way too much, considering what we saw from the rest of the wide receiver market.
It's kind of like that Trey Lance deal, a couple of years ago, where you say, I'm not opposed to you making a deal. I don't want to get mad at you for making a deal or for trying to improve your team, but you took a position where you're adding a guy who feels like he's, at best a Tolbert right now, but probably below him right now. And then you go, ceiling's really high. You go, that's great, but what does the ceiling do for you this season?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And do you think that all of a sudden they're going to go, well, he's gotten 5 targets in the last 4 games. Well, let's, in the end of the season, start playing him up a lot more, and we'll build up his draft capital, and then it'll be worth a 3rd. That doesn't really make sense at the end of the Panther season. So I don't get the urgency to make that deal that you gave up more than you probably should have. Where if it was a 5th, I think it was probably worth a 6th, but maybe worth a 5th. But if they call you and they go, man, we just want him off our roster, he's available, we just want him off, then yeah, I get you want to make that, but not for a 4th. I just don't get it. I don't get a lot of things Jerry's done recently, so it falls into that line. But yeah, that one seemed a little weird. And the Texans trade, we can go into that. It's not a huge one, but it didn't necessarily make a ton of sense. It felt like the Texans could still use some guys. But yeah, trading Khalil Davis to the 49ers for a 7th. I don't know.
Yeah, he hadn't played.
He hadn't really played. He's a young guy, but I guess they felt they didn't need him on the roster. Maybe he was not as happy not playing, so they move him off to the 49ers, who just need some depth and trying to stop the run. But again, a 4-4 team that is making moves to try and improve some of their weaknesses.
Yeah, I don't. The Texans, I don't know much. They could have gotten a wide receiver potentially, but there was no wide receiver to the Jonathan Mingo conversation that we were just having that was going to be able to have the type of impact they need right now.
No, and not for what they wanted to pay,
and not for what they wanted. That's true. They're definitely not giving up a 4th round pick for him.
Because
by the way, getting back to that for the Cowboys, because the 4th round picks are valuable. Since 2016, they've picked 4 Pro Bowlers in the 4th round. And hell, they got Dak Prescott in the 4th round. They got Jake Ferguson in the 4th round. It's actually where they get a lot of their tight ends in the 4th round. They got Dorrance Armstrong. Remember, he was a 4th round pick for him. And now in back-to-back years, you don't have a 4th rounder. And you could make the argument as we have about the Trey Lance experiment, which, by the way, I backed at the time because the Cowboys needed to invest in quarterback. And investment in quarterback, no matter how crazy and wacky it is, you can justify it because it's quarterback. You can justify doing crazy, wild things at quarterback because you do have to have I do think you have to have an unconventional approach to quarterback. And I've criticized the Cowboys for not investing enough time and draft capital in quarterback. So I wasn't necessarily critical of that move. I understood it was a roll of the dice, but like I said, that position, if you hit, it's worth it. Wide receiver, you can make the argument. I know it's a really valuable position now, but for the Cowboys, you can make your not necessarily worth the risk for that fourth round pick, considering the guy they got in return and considering what we've seen from the wide receiver market over the last 4 or 5 years. Hell, the Cowboys themselves gave up Amari Cooper, a number one wide receiver, and got a fifth round pick or whatever in return. They understand a fourth round pick and in what value it holds. Because like I said, they've drafted really good guys in the fourth round. And ultimately, if this Jonathan Mingo thing doesn't work out, if he doesn't become at least your number 3 wide receiver, it's a bad deal. Period. It's a bad deal if he doesn't become like your number 3 guy in the next couple of years here. You got 2 years of control over him. So yeah.
But if it's not like if you're getting him in the last year where he needs a new contract and you basically get a third wide receiver that now you're going to have to pay $25 million for, because in 3 years, who knows what the market's going to be for a wide receiver. I mean, I get it. I think they're looking for a number 2 also because they're trying to replace Brandon Cooks, who's going to be going off.
If he can become that, then you won.
Yeah, and I get the feeling.
If he become that, you won the trade. Good job.
The biggest question is, when you're scouting Mingo, were you scouting his college still, or were you scouting his pro?
It should have been a little bit of both.
Yeah, but it should have been a lot of pro because if you
more pro, yes,
more pro, and that's the question. Is I get you loved him, and you may have had a first round grade on him coming out of college. But if you look at him in the pros and you go, he can't stay on the field in Carolina. I don't know if you can completely blame everything on Carolina at that point, or you can say, maybe he's just not getting open, because some of his scores of getting open and being able to be a active receiver are not great.
No, I agree with you. It's it doesn't look like right now. It looks like a bad trade by the Cowboys. Looks like they paid too much for him, and he doesn't look like a guy that's going to be able to contribute this season in a significant way for the Cowboys. I think you're looking at an off season and next year. Then I'll get back to your point. You're like, well, he's going to be learning a new system because you're going to be hiring a new coach, likely more likely than not, and with a new offense. And then how's that going to work for this, for this experiment route with Jonathan Mingo? So right now for the Cowboys, right now it looks like a bad deal on the surface. But I'll give it, you got to give it a couple of years. Like I said, if he ends up cracking their top 3 wide receivers by next season, and like you said, ends up becoming the number 2 to replace a Brandon Cooks, that's a win for the Cowboys. So we won't know totally if they won this trade or not until then. But right now it looks like the Carolina Panthers got the better deal on the surface at the start of this thing. Looks like the Carolina Panthers may have hustled Jerry Jones a little bit out of that 4th round pick. All right, we'll talk more trade deadline as the show goes on. I promise you that. We'll get back into some of the NFL news, notes, and nuggets from the day, but we got to talk Texas football on the other side. There is an update on the actually, I think maybe the best wide receiver that Florida has to offer. An injury update on him. We'll talk about the Texas offense, what they hope to achieve coming out of the bye week versus Florida. We'll also get into this Michael Taft quote. I love it. It's he's doing his due diligence. All right, he's doing some insider research, if you will, on the quarterback Aiden Warner, who is a walk-on. He's a walk-on transfer from Yale, who is going to get his first start likely versus Texas. And Taft has a connection to him. We'll talk about that connection and how it can help the Longhorns. All that and more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis, lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis, coming back here on the Horn. Welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get to some Texas football conversation and go behind the burnt orange curtain. I saw this quote from Michael Taft. Shout out to Michael Taft, and he revealed that he may actually have some inside information on Aiden Warner, who is likely going to make his first start versus Texas. He is a walk-on transfer from Yale, and Michael Taft has connections at Yale. One of his former teammates, Ryan Lindley, is at Yale. He said this to the media earlier this week. He said, Warner played at Yale last year. My best friend is a guy by the name of Ryan Lindley. He was one of their best receivers last year at Yale. Ryan wore number 16 for Jackson, just like I do, which is one of his former teammates who passed away. He said Aiden Warner wore number 15 at Yale. So they were locker buddies. He said, I'm going to get the whole scoop from Ryan here come Wednesday or Thursday. And he said, that's what he said at Monday's media availability. He also said that he talked to Ryan. Taft mentioned, of course, they were teammates. He said he talked to Ryan yesterday about Aiden Warner, the transfer quarterback from Yale, is going to start for Florida likely. He says he said he could sling it. Said his arm's phenomenal. He's a competitor. He's a really good football player. He's built for that moment. He wants to play big time football, and that's his opportunity. So it's going to be cool. Yeah. All right. So he said he can sling it. I didn't see that when I watched Aiden Warner versus Georgia. Not in versus Georgia. Hell, Quinn Ewers didn't like he could sling it a lot of times versus Georgia. So Georgia can make you look like that. They can put you in a blender. So that could very well be the case. And we're going to see, another version of Aiden Warner. I did not see a quarterback that was, going to be able to slang it versus Texas, because Texas defense is just as good as Georgia's defense. So if Georgia's defense can make you look bad, look at what Texas defense did to Carson Beck. Texas defense can make you look bad too. So I'm assuming that Aiden Warner won't get, I don't think he'll get much breathing room versus Texas. I think they'll speed up his process though. And this is why. Remember I told you guys this. If you get an inexperienced quarterback, and most of the time it's for rookies and freshmen, but if you get an inexperienced quarterback, which Aiden Warner is, he doesn't have a ton of experience there. I usually the train of thought is you want to blitz them. You want to speed up their process, put a lot on their plate, and force them to have to make decisions quickly. And usually if you add, the equation of inexperience, with, blitzing and putting a lot on their plate and force them to make quick decisions, they usually make bad decisions. And they usually end up making mistakes. And that's what Texas did to Michael Hawkins in the Oklahoma game. Now the difference was, of course, he was young, so they went with the train of thought of let's blitz him, let's put a lot on his plate, force him to make decisions quickly, get the ball out of his hands, and it worked. The key was Oklahoma was actually down to their fourth or fifth starting wide receivers, because their top 4 or 5 guys were actually out with injury. Florida's going to be without Eugene Wilson. I think he's their most explosive wide receiver. Now, he wasn't necessarily the leading wide receiver because he's been dealing with injuries all season long. He got hurt actually early on during the football season. So he's been dealing with an injury, but he's going to be out now. He's having season-ending surgery. So for Texas, in my opinion, that makes their job a whole lot easier. He was one of those guys where you definitely had to know where he was at all times. And with him, now being unavailable, I just think it ends up making Texas' job a whole lot easier. So you may see some of those higher blitz rates I talked about. You may see them just because now they don't have to worry about as many guys on the outside that can create separation, that can give them problems in man-to-man coverage. Now they do have another guy who I think Texas needs to be aware of, Elijah Badger. He's the leading receiver. He's got 560 receiving yards. Guys averaging 23 yards per reception. Got 24 receptions and averaging 23 per. Right? He can go. He might be a problem. They're going to try to chunk it to him down the field if they get one-on-ones. But the big question is now, will Montrell Johnson be available for them? Montrell Johnson was their marquee bell cow running back to start the season, and I think he's their best running back. Averaged 5.3 yards per rush, but wasn't available versus Georgia. And since then, his injury, they've been dealing with kind of a running back by committee, or just 2 guys as really this committee, Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson. Ball averaging over 4.5 yards per rush, 4.6, I believe, and Jacoby Jackson's at 5.7. They may have the best group of running backs that Texas has faced. Other, and I don't even know if Georgia had a better group. I think Georgia had a better lead back in Trevor Etienne. He's an NFL guy. He's going to play on Sundays. And hell, I think Florida may have one or two guys that'll be playing on Sundays too in this backfield. So the depth of it, I think it may be the best backfield that Texas has faced, just the overall depth of it, if Montrell Johnson is available. If no Montrell Johnson, Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson are still pretty good. But Texas hadn't faced a running back room with the depth of this group. So that'll be something I think Texas will be a test for Texas. They'll try to establish the run early, especially if Montrell Johnson can play. They'll do it with backs who are dynamic and guys they can keep fresh because they'll keep kind of rotating those guys in. And that'll help Aiden Warner, who, right now, but he was 9. I think he was like maybe 7 of 22 or something like that versus Georgia. Did not look great, but hey, he didn't have time to. There was no game plan specific for him. They'll have him taking, of course, all the first team reps. There'll be a game plan specific to his skill set, but I do think he's limited in what he can provide. So they're going to lean heavily on the running game. I think they're going to take that shot with Eli Badger. And they have another kid, DK, I believe is his name. He's got 23 receptions, 428 yards, averaging 18 yards per reception. So the guys, these are the two main threats at wide receiver with Eugene Wilson out, and they're averaging almost 19 yards per reception and 23 yards per reception. Right? They're going downfield. Now they had DJ Lagway, who had a cannon of an arm, and Graham Mertz actually was more of a short intermediate passer. I don't know how strong, I'll admit, Aiden Warner's arm is. They didn't really open the offense up, but he just had trouble with accuracy throwing the football more than 10 yards downfield. So maybe the game plan will be short, quick throws, get the ball out of his hands real fast. But if I am Texas, I may, without the threat of Eugene Wilson, I may blitz him, light him up a little bit more. Let's talk about the Texas offense and what may be the reason for the offense losing some of the mojo. Sark talked about this yesterday, that, they got to get their mojo back on offense. And he's right about that. They have been, if you go look at I went back and clocked the last 3 games for the Texas Longhorns. This is where they ranked. This is where they rank nationally just in the last 3 weeks in that time span. So we're talking about the last 3 games for them, last 4 weeks, because they've been, of course, with the bye week as well. Yards per completion, 122nd. Yards per play, 97th. Yards per attempt, 102nd. Sack percentage allowed, 108th. Rushing yards per game, 115th, and 109th in yards per rush. Now, where they are, if you go look at their rankings in those categories, just all throughout the season, I mean, they're, top 20 in yards per play and in yards per attempt. They're average in yards per completion, average in sack percentage allowed. They're average in rushing yards per game and yards per rush. So they're not below average or bottom of the barrel bad like they have been in some of those categories in the last 3 weeks throughout the season. But the last 3 weeks, they've been going deeper and deeper into SEC play. So the concern is the deeper you get into SEC play against SEC athletes, is this something that is going to persist and it's something that is going to end up being a systemic issue for Texas, or do we see Texas bounce back and maybe it was just that 3-game stretch where you played your 3 best defenses you're going to face potentially with, Oklahoma, Georgia was really good defense. Vandy had a really good defensive game plan that they were able to kind of siphon from those 2 game plans against Oklahoma and Georgia. That's a concern. What's the bounce back performance by the offense, and do they get their mojo back? Here's one of the reasons I think the mojo might be missing too. We haven't talked about this a lot, but you have had injuries to Isaiah Bond the last 3 weeks. We got hurt in the Oklahoma game, so he was limited there, limited in the game versus Georgia, didn't play and didn't travel versus Vandy. And then in the Vandy game, you end up having an injury to Ryan Wingo early in, not an injury, but apparently that was a collision prior to the game. We thought, he's going to be your explosive element to the offense with no Isaiah Bond. And then he didn't play that much, or at least wasn't that impactful in the Vandy game. So you were missing your kind of key explosive elements. And when I looked at, this is just SEC play, I went and looked at most explosive receivers in SEC play. So pass catchers, talking about receivers, tight ends, running backs can be here too. And you look at 20 plus yard receptions. Isaiah Bond, it's crazy when you think about this. The most explosive receiver for Texas is actually Gunnar Helm. He has. It's probably a trivia question most Longhorn fans would not get right. Who is the most explosive pass catcher for the Longhorns in 2020? It's actually Gunnar Helm. He's got 10, 20 plus yard receptions on the season. We'll talk about that later. But getting back to the explosive element of the offense, Isaiah Bond provides that world class speed, which you have to account for if you're an allocated resources for if you're a defense. You got to know where Isaiah Bond is at all times, because if you lose him for a split second, that's all it takes, and he could be gone to the house. All right, getting behind your defense or even on one of those quick detached screens. Then there's Ryan Wingo. We talk about Ryan Wingo. Ryan Wingo actually has more 30 plus yard receptions than Isaiah Bond does. He's got 4. Isaiah Bond's got 3. So we talk about Isaiah Bond's world class speed, adding that explosivity to the offense. Here, Ryan Wingo does too. And yet in that Vanderbilt game, you had neither. I said Ryan Wingo didn't have much of an impact at all in that game. And so you really did lose your explosive identity in that game. And with Bond being out multiple games, or at least being limited in multiple games and being out in that Vanderbilt game, I think also, yeah, it's affected your explosive identity. So the question is, when you get Bond back and you get Wingo back and those guys close to being, as fully healthy as possible, do you get the explosive element back to the offense? I do think that was a big part of it, that you lost some of that, because Wingo and Bond, they provide that. It's not Golden, even though I'll say Golden, when you look at 20 plus yard receptions, Golden's got 8 of them. DeAndre Moore is also a guy that provides, some explosivity. He's got 7. And actually, so those guys can do it. They can. We've seen DeAndre Moore go down the field, but he doesn't put the fear into defenses and force the defense to have to account for his speed. Bond does that. Like, defensive coordinators going in have to go, all right, we got a number 7. We got to make sure we know where he is, and we got to have safeties over the top of him. And we got the right coverage called when we're going up against him. We can't allow too many one-on-ones versus a slow defensive back or a safety lined up on him. You make sure you have solutions built in to the problems he's going to present. And I think Ryan Wingo, too, just based on the explosive element that he provides, I think he's also another guy defense coordinators go, well, I don't know if I know he's a freshman, but we need to make sure this guy doesn't hurt us. We need to know where he is in certain situations. I don't know if any other receiver provides that type of, or at least is able to invoke that type of fear in defensive coordinators. And I think that affects the way the defensive coordinators are going to play you. So bringing those guys back, it very well may, we'll see, versus Florida, if it brings back some of that, that verticality that you want in the offense. And it's sometimes not even verticality. How a lot of Gunnar Helms is 20 plus yard plays have been yak yards after the catch. So that's something to watch. Bond did practice. Sark said that. I said Wingo wasn't dealing with like an injury, but he did have like some weird collision before the game. And then I think he was limited as a result of that. You get those 2 guys back. Those are your, along with Gunnar Helm, your most explosive elements on the offense. And last game versus Vanderbilt, you really have access to them. All right, we come back. We'll get into the topic for the big fat poll of the day. We'll also get into the musically themed day of the week. All then more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Rivers coming back on the horn.
Back on the Rodcast on a Wednesday morning, and that means it's a one artist Wednesday. And this week's artist is Glenn Fry. Glenn Fry would have had a birthday this week, so we'll be playing some Glenn Fry, which is some Glenn Fry and some Eagles as well, because Glenn Fry and the Eagles, but they're they're Glenn Fry Eagles songs. So we'll be playing those as well for you as we go throughout the show today. Let's get to the big fat poll of the day. Text line's open. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. Oops. Turn that down. 512-447-3776 is the text line number, and we'll get that posted up on X at the Horn ATX.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
Big fat poll of the day today. We're just talking about the offense getting their mojo back. So do you think they get it done? And we'll ask you, how many points will Texas score against Florida? Do they get their mojo back against this Florida team? So we'll give you the scores. We normally do 0-14, 15-24, 25-34, and 35 plus. If you can get that 35 plus again, that's where you want to be. It seemed against Vanderbilt they were going to get there in the first half.
Yeah,
it seemed like, okay, we're on that path to get back the mojo going, and then no. So is Texas this week going to be able to put it together for a complete game, get the game together, and come back and get you a big win and get that offensive mojo running?
It's up to the O-line, in my opinion. I think Quinn had a bounce-back performance. You're going to get Isaiah Bond back. I don't know. I think he'll be limited still, but you'll get Isaiah Bond back. So you'll get that verticality, explosivity back to the offense I was talking about. I think Quinn showed you, he had 17 completions in a row. I don't care if you're completing them behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage, or whatever. That means he's getting, he's in a rhythm. And I think that was a nice bounce back performance. Yes, I know he had 2 picks, but we talked about the luck element with those tip passes. Some of that's on him, but some of those were just breakdowns in pass protection that had nothing to do with Quinn. So I think Quinn bounces back really well. I think you'll have, close to his full complement of wide receivers. It's all about the O-line, how they pass protect, and the O-line providing some push in the run game. The truth is, Texas' run game is just average. It's just average.
Yeah.
You're looking at broken tackles per attempt, if you're looking at yards after contact per attempt, if you're looking at outside run game, inside run game, if you're looking at, all of the yards per rush, rushing yards per game, it's all just average. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Nothing wrong with that. But you need to make up for what is just average right now in the run game. The O-line is the one that needs to, in my opinion, excel, because they are the ones with the elite prospects on the O-line. Suppose that we had one of the greatest offensive line recruiting classes in modern college football history a couple of years ago. They're the ones with all of the, kind of the NFL caliber guys. Nobody's talking about the NFL caliber guys in the backfield. You're talking about guys like Kelvin Banks. You're talking about Cam Williams. Jake Majors should be an NFL guy. You're the one with the NFL talent. You have all the experience on the O-line. You have the continuity on the O-line. You should be providing more of a push in the run game. The running backs have had injuries all season long. They can't stay healthy. They lost C.J. Baxter, the top running back in that group. They lost another guy, Christian Clark, for the rest of the season. And Jarrett Gibson and Trey Wisner have been nicked up all season long. So it's not really on those guys. There's a reason those guys were third. Jaden Blue, they were third and fourth string guys. I mean, that was the reason for his backups, third and fourth string guys. So, but on the O-line, how many backups have been playing on the O-line? How many injuries have we had on the O-line early on? Not many.
No.
You guys are healthy. You guys are one of the most experienced O-lines in the country. You guys are talking about being a Joe Moore Award winning offensive line. If that's the case, pick up the slack. I know the backfield's slacking, but I know why it's slacking. I don't know why the offensive line is.
Yeah. No, and they looked really good through the beginning of the season.
Before they started playing SEC caliber athletes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, it's the big bodies. And I mean, they look good against Michigan, but there was other issues with Michigan we know now, but they look good against Michigan as well.
They did.
But yeah, no, they look good against teams. And then when you got in the big bodies, it became a bigger issue of not being able to do things. And that's, I think, again, in the bye week, you hope that they could take a step back from it now, knowing what they're going up against and recalibrate what they need to do, because they have the talent, they have the ability. It's just putting it together and the communication, getting ready to take those on, and then seeing those blitzes, man. You just can't let Quinn get free rushers at him. Can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. That's the number one thing hopefully they worked on. If anything needs to improve immediately, it will be pass protection. The run game, maybe the run game is what it is. I mean, maybe it's all you can do right now this season to just be average to slightly above average. But you were an elite pass protection unit early on in the season.
Yeah.
Elite. We're one of the best in the country. And now that there's been severe regression there. So get back to that. If you can get back to that, then I think the offense will get back to its identity, which is pass first offense, which you pass to open up the run. The run game complements the passing game if they get back to being an elite pass protection unit. But if not, then I struggle to find what the identity of the offense is. Because your identity is based on what you do really well. I think Texas throws the ball really well. And if they can't pass protect, effectively, then that identity is also something you can't commit to if you're Texas. So I think they'll score 30. It should score 30 versus Florida. They should get to the 30s versus Florida. They should. What did Georgia get to? I don't know. What did Georgia get to versus Florida? Didn't they get to now the starting quarterback went down. If they got to the 40s, then the 30s, then you should get there.
34 to
34. Yeah. Come on, man. Carson Beck is playing like doggish right now. And Quinn ain't playing like an elite quarterback prospect right now, but he definitely had a better bounce back performance than Carson Beck. If they can score 34, Texas should be able to score 30. So I'm going to say 30.
Yeah.
Say to get right to
Carson
30,
Beck still
right
threw
there.
3 picks in that game.
3 picks and you got to 34 points. Come on now. 3 picks and you still got to 34. Texas should be able to get to 30 versus it. And coming off a bye week, by the way. Get that. So you're healthy and your schemes should be on point. Your execution, right, for Texas, it should be at a really high level coming off a bye week. That'd be like the Cowboys. When the Cowboys are coming off a bye week and then got mollywopped by the 49ers. That's disappointing. You're coming off a bye week against Florida, who they should be. Florida should be as beat up as they've been all season. They just had a really physical game against Georgia, against a rival. Came out of it now with their third string quarterback who's going to have to start the game for them because their starting quarterback got hurt. And they're missing their best, their most explosive wide receiver. He's going to be out with season-ending surgery. You're fresh. They're beat up. They got to play a third string quarterback, so their execution is going to be, it's going to be struggling. They're going to be struggling to execute at a high level consistently. Your execution should be on point.
Yeah.
It should be pristine early on.
And that O&D line did just have to go up against Georgia's O&D line the previous week, where they should be a little bit more beat up than you are.
A lot more beat up than you are. So if early on, I don't see a focused, really polished Texas team in terms of the penalties and pass protection, the run blocking, I'd be very disappointed against Florida, because Florida, as we pointed out, they're coming in wobbling. They're coming in limping to DKR, and Texas should be feeling real good. And they should be fresh and they should be fresh and focused. And I want to see it mostly reflected in that O-line. This is a big game for the O-line, because if the O-line doesn't bounce back this game, then we know, okay, that's just what they are. This is who they are as an offensive line. If they can't bounce back against Florida, then we know this is who they are. And then we have to adjust our expectations. I don't think this is who they are. This is a group that wanted to be considered for the Joe Moore Award before the season started. Well, you can't give up 11 sacks in 2 games and be in the conversation to be the best O-line in the country. Just can't have it. Just can't happen. So got to fix that. And you can't have as many penalties if you want to be considered the best O-line in the country. At one point, they were playing like that Michigan game. They were playing like the best O-line in the country. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Quinn was also playing like the best quarterback in the country in that game. In that game, people were saying, "Man, Texas might have the best offensive line in the country," and Quinn was leapfrogging some of his quarterback peers, and in the conversation to be not only a Heisman finalist but the top quarterback taken in the draft. I don't think it's a coincidence. They got to get back to that. I don't know if that's going to happen, them winning the Joe Moore Award or Quinn getting to be a Heisman finalist or the top pick in the draft. I don't think those things are going to happen right now, but you got to get back to playing at that level where people can at least have that conversation about you. And we know it's in them. That's why Texas should never showed us what they were capable of, and the Michigan game showed us what they were capable of. And I think they got to get back to that mojo, as Sark talked about, get back to looking like the best version of themselves. All right, good stuff there for the topic for the Big Fat Poll today. We'll come back and discuss more Texas football, but we'll dive into the NFL trade deadline, tell you who the winners and losers are of the NFL trade deadline. We'll also talk about the college football playoff rankings that came out yesterday, the first of the 2024 season. All that and more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis on Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis. Coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a Hump Day edition of the Rodcast and a One Artist Wednesday edition of the Rodcast. That's when my man Patrick goes deep down the rabbit hole into the catalog of one specific artist, group, or band. And today it's all about Glenn Frey. Glenn Frey, Time with Eagles, Glenn Frey on his own, but he'll be the featured artist for One Artist Wednesday. So appreciate Patrick hooking us up there. He also hooks us up with the topic for the Big Fat Poll of the day. That is all already posted for you on X at the Horn ATX. Patrick, what is the topic for the Big Fat Poll today?
Big Fat Poll today. How many points will Texas score against Florida? We gave you 4 options: 0 to 14, 15 to 24, 25 to 34, and 35 plus.
Wow. Yeah, 30. I got 30. I got them right at 30. I'm just gonna go right at 30. So I'll say if Georgia can get to 34, Texas should be able to get to 30 on the season, especially coming off a bye week. Especially coming off. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most important part. Coming off a bye week with a lot of things to fix. I expect the offensive line to have a big time bounce back performance, run game, pass protection. So I'll go 30. But if they don't get to 30, no, that's I don't know. I don't know what total would concern me. Like if they don't get to like 27, I definitely would be concerned.
Yeah.
If we only scored 24 points versus Florida, I'd be concerned.
Yeah, and I mean,
you got to get to 30.
I think your main concern, or my main concern, of them not getting to 30 is all the issues listed before. Offensive line, they're not able to get the ball out, negative plays, all of those things, of course, are the main factor. Because even with what I'll say next, that shouldn't be a problem if your offense is rolling. But I think your big problem would be if Florida kind of plays what we've seen before and they understand third string quarterback, we're just going to try and run the ball. That's our best players are running backs right now. Let's just run the ball as much and run clock. Let's go as slow as we possibly can to try and stretch this game out as much as we can because we know it's a benefit for us. So I think that's your best shot if you're Florida to keep Texas scoring down is to try and not give them the ball. And if they're effective running the football, then giving Texas less opportunities, and then Texas still offensive mojo doesn't work. That's how you get a lower score. But I'm going to go with Texas still being able to get it done.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think 30 for me, I'd feel good about it. If they don't get to like 27, then what are the reasons? What happened? Why didn't they get there? And it would probably be some of the same things that have plagued this Texas offense the last 2 weeks or last 3 games, I should say, which are penalties, pass protection issues, not being buttoned up enough in the run game and not getting enough of a push in the run game. So that I can't wait to see how they respond and in those areas, right? I think pass protection is the one thing I'll be looking for the most. And really, if this offensive line can get a push in the run game, how's Sark going to come out in this game and start it? Because the way to attack Florida is their rush defense. They have one of the, I think they're like 90th or close to 90th in the country in rush defense. They're one of the worst rush defenses in the country. If you're Texas, I mean, that's the way to attack them. But Sark, as we know, opens up with the passing game, leans on the short intermediate passing game early on. How's Florida gonna, play you with their safeties? Are they gonna keep their safeties back deep? If they do, we know Sark, based on what we saw versus Vanderbilt, and even what he said in the post game and in the Monday media availability following that game, he said, "Hey, if they're going to give us these short underneath throws, we're going to take them. And if they start to cheat up, all right, then we'll throw it over the top of them." So he's gonna build his game plan based on the way the defense plays them, and I'm not sure how Florida's going to do that. Does Florida decide, hey, let's force Texas to beat us with 8 to 10 play drives and don't give up an explosive play, or let's be aggressive, which Vandy did some of. Remember, Vandy came after him. Highest blitz rate that Quinn has faced so far this year, higher blitz rates, and take some chances. Let's just roll the dice and let the chips fall they may. And maybe creating enough chaos will benefit us, and it did for Vandy. Now, they got beat on some of those plays that they had the cornerback blitz on the DeAndre Moore wheel route touchdown on the 27-yard Gunner Helm. They're doing another cornerback blitz. Oh, no, they got beat on some of those times where they were throwing out some of those exotic second level, third level blitzes. It happens because you're going to be exposed. There was some busted coverages at times where they were exposed when they were blitzing their cornerbacks, but they did get 3 sacks out of it, and they did get 2 interceptions out of it. I would say it's worth it. I don't give a damn how many times you get beat. If I can get 2 turnovers and 3 sacks just from being gratuitous with one particular concept, And it was just one. I mean, that cornerback blitz is really what Vandy. I mean, that caused a lot of issues for Texas. Like I said, 3 of the sacks that they allowed, there was a cornerback blitz involved in the pressure package. That is something you will see versus Florida. You don't see that until you figure it out. And so I think A-gap blitzes, delayed blitzes and rushers, and cornerback blitzes, slot and boundary. You're going to see, I guarantee you'll see versus Florida. In fact, I don't know how long it's going to take. It may not take very long at all. You're going to see them early and often versus Florida. If not, then that's why Florida is a bad football team. If you don't see those concepts executed, deployed by Florida's defense, then that's why Florida's a bad football team, because Texas hadn't figured them out in the last 2 games. Why wouldn't you give them or present that problem to them in this matchup? Guarantee they will. And Texas knows that, by the way. That's football in a nutshell. All right, so that's the topic for the Big Fat Poll today. We'll also get to the Horn headlines here. Then we'll come back and discuss the trade deadline in the NFL. Sometimes I refer to it as the NBAification of the NFL. They want more trades. They want a kind of fast and furious, really kind of high octane, very action-packed trade deadline. For years, the NFL's trade deadline was crickets. There was nothing going on, maybe 1, maybe 2 trades. That has changed the last couple of years in the NFL. Trust me, that is deliberate. All right, they're stealing that concept from the NBA, and it's actually working out pretty well for the NFL. We'll talk about that coming up, and also whether the Texans and the Cowboys, whether they are up to the task this week. Both of them have a Herculean task ahead of them. For the Texans, they got to face a juggernaut opponent in the Detroit Lions. We'll talk about that. I don't know if anybody's playing better than the Detroit Lions right now. And then for the Cowboys, with all the issues happening, including the injury to Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb dealing with the injury, they got to face a division rival. And their division rivals playing their best football of the season right now. So we'll get to both of those and try break down those matchups a little bit. But first, let's get updated, let's get educated, let's get informed with all the top stories of the day with Patrick Davis and the Horn headlines.
All right, your Horn headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the NBA, the Mavericks take on the Bulls tonight with P.J. Washington out with a right knee sprain, and Derek Lively is listed as a game-time decision with a shoulder injury. The Spurs will take on the Rockets in Houston after the Spurs announced yesterday that Jeremy Sohan will miss several weeks because of a broken thumb that will require surgery. In the NFL, the trade deadline passed yesterday with a few moves being completed. Edge Zadarius Smith was traded from the Browns to the Lions for a 5th and 6th round pick. The Bengals acquired running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears for a 7th round pick. The Saints sent 4-time Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore and a 5th round pick to the Commanders for a 3rd, 4th, and 6th round pick. The Steelers added Mike Williams from the Jets for a 5th round pick and edge Preston Smith from the Packers for his 7th. The Ravens get cornerback help from Tre'Davious White from the Rams at a 7th round pick swap. And the Texans sent D tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for a 7th, while the Cowboys added 2nd-year receiver Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers for a 4th round pick. And in college football, the first college football poll was released last night with Oregon coming in at number 1, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Texas at number 5. And that is your Horn headlines.
Thank you, Patrick, for the Horn headlines. Appreciate those. All right, let's we talked about the college football playoff rankings last hour. We'll get back to those, of course. Let's talk some NFL here and talk about the NFL trade deadline. I've been saying for a while, the NFL, they really admire the NBA in a lot of ways, actually. They admire what the NBA did on Christmas. That's why they decided to steal Christmas, because they're like, hey, man, the NBA, they've taken over that that holiday on their sports calendar. We're a little jealous of that. Now the NFL, they want to infringe on the NBA's territory. And they'll never be able to obviously steal the sports calendar in terms of the NBA's trade deadline. They can't take away the NBA's headlines there, but they will steal the methods that the NBA uses to really promote and really to sell and market their trade deadline. And they do it better than anybody else. The trade deadline for the NBA is fast and furious. It's action-packed. You're talking about it for a couple of days before and after. The NFL is envious of that. And that's why the NFL changed their trade deadline. And a couple of years ago, they changed it because they wanted to incentivize teams to trade more. They wanted to have more of an NBA culture when it came to NFL trades. And it's not the NBA yet because the NBA is a different monster altogether. But teams are more active at the trade deadline than they have ever been. As a matter of fact, there were Adam Schefter had 19 trades. Pro Football Network had 18 trades. So 18 or 19 trades. But according to this stat, that is the second most, the 18 or 19 trades that happened since October 1st until the trade deadline. They were the second most in that time span in NFL history, behind 2022 when there were 21 such trades that were made. So the NFL wants these. They want more trades. They want blockbuster trades too, big splashes. They can get them. But this is, I think, just a trend that you're going to continue to see increase. More and more teams being active before the trade deadline, and I think the NFL moving the trade deadline was a big part of that, so teams can now get more of a accurate assessment of where they are. Right, we buyers or sellers, and a lot of teams selling, a lot of teams buying. With this 18 trades happening in between October 1st and between that and the trade deadline. My favorite, I got three that are my favorite trades, and they're the three most obvious. Well, two of them are the most obvious. When you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you get a number one wide receiver in the trade market, I don't know how the rest of the NFL let it happen, but his impact is going to be almost. I mean, it's been immediate. Like, it's been an immediate impact. DeAndre Hopkins just added to the mix, and the Chiefs' offense is a different offense already. He has activated Travis Kelce. He's activated Patrick Mahomes. You go look at it. Patrick Mahomes now in his first weeks 1 through 7 without DeAndre Hopkins. In the last 2 weeks as he's been on the team, he was completing 67% of his passes. He had more interceptions than touchdowns, 6-8, 82 passer rating. With DeAndre Hopkins, passing touchdowns, he has 5 passing touchdowns, so 1 interception, 107 passer rating in the last 2 weeks, and a 74% completion percentage. He's starting to look like his old self after having his worst start to a season in his career with the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce with DeAndre Hopkins, he's got 24 receptions, 190 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. Matter of fact, he had his first stretch of back-to-back games with 10+ receptions, only for the second time in his career in these last 2 weeks with DeAndre Hopkins. You got to go back to 2018 before he had a stretch like this, or last time he had a stretch like this of 10+ receptions in multiple weeks, in back-to-back weeks. But before DeAndre Hopkins, weeks 1 through 7, 28 receptions, 245 receiving yards. That's it. Now he's got 24 receptions, 190 receiving yards in just 2 weeks. He's a different player. The offense is different. They had their first 30+ point performance this season. Matter of fact, they just broke a streak. They had gone 18 games. 18 straight games without scoring at least 30 points. And now they got their first 30-point performance. That offense is about to look different with DeAndre Hopkins, who had he had his first multi-touchdown performance. You had to go all the way back to 2021. Last time he had a multi-touchdown performance. Easily the best trade and the most impactful trade, and it's not even close. My second favorite, though, is Zadarius Smith going to the Lions. Makes a lot of sense because they lose Aiden Hutchinson, who was leading the NFL in sacks at the time. And this is how that defense has changed, though, without Aiden Hutchinson. Of course, when you lose such a force multiplier, when you lose an alpha pass rusher like that, it's going to have a negative effect. But listen to this. So without Aiden Hutchinson on third down, money downs, right? Detroit had a 53% pressure rate on money downs, on third downs in the first 6 weeks of the season. Matter of fact, they had 5 sacks on third downs in the first 6 weeks of the season. Since then, since that Aiden Hutchinson injury, their pressure rate has dropped to 21% on third downs. And the Lions have sacked the quarterback only once on third down since that Aiden Hutchinson injury. That's where they've been most effective. So they need a guy that when they know the opposing team is going to throw the football in a predictable passing situation, they need a dog that can put out there and just be a war daddy on that defensive line and go win. Zadarius Smith was the best option. He can. The guy's had double-digit sacks in, I think, 3 out of the last 5 years, and I think one of those years he was hurt. He's on his way to double-digit sacks now. He's got 5 sacks on the season. His pressure rate 13.9, but Aiden Hutchinson's pressure rate before he got hurt was 25%. He had 25% pressure rate. A quarter of the damn time he's rushing the passer, he was putting the pressure on the opposing quarterback. That's 13.9 just show you the difference between the two. There is a drop off. The average time to sack for Aiden Hutchinson was 3 seconds. For Zadarius Smith is 3.9 seconds. There's a difference. All right, so there are different levels of pass rusher, but at least you got a guy now who is an alpha pass rusher, and in a predictable pass situation on third down, you don't have to change your blueprint too much. And they had to change their blueprint a lot because of the loss of such a unique elite player. Now you still got to adjust it and modify it, but not as much as you once did. So those are easily the two best trades made, and my favorite because both teams are right now on a collision course, it would seem, to represent the NFC and the AFC in the Super Bowl. And they made big moves for glaring deficiencies, glaring holes on their roster. Both because of injury, right? Rashee Rice went down. They tried to push Xavier Worthy into that number 1 wide receiver role. Just has not worked. Nothing against X-Man. It just hasn't worked out. He's just not ready for it. You even saw in the game. He's not ready to be that guy yet. So they need to go get a guy. And they went and got him. And they went and got the best available for them in DeAndre Hopkins. And same thing with Detroit. Right? They lost their best pass rusher, arguably their best defensive player. Can't replace that guy, but can you go get somebody who can still provide you with some elements of what they could bring to the table? And Zadarius Smith, in a predictable pass situation, just ask him to go tee off on the opposing quarterback. He can do that. So those are easily two. And I like the Marshawn Lattimore deal. That's a good deal.
But this is when Rod, you talk about value all the time, and that's what's really great about those deals is that value in it, where you could have gone and got a better pass rusher if you wanted to spend a lot of draft capital and leverage it a little bit more. Like I think if you really wanted to go after Max Crosby and give up a high pick or two, you maybe could have got a Max Crosby who's a really, really good edge rusher.
Yeah.
And you could have gone and tried to get that next level. But if you look at the value of a giving up a 5th and a 6th and you get a 7th back with Zadarius, I think those are the types of trades where you look at and go, okay, this makes a ton of sense and puts you in the winning. And for the Chiefs, for a 5th round pick for Hopkins, you're getting guys that are not super overpaid at the wide receiver and the D edge position. I think Zadarius Smith's contract is 2 years, $23 million. So not bad.
No, not bad at all.
So, you're getting guys that have pretty good value on top, where, a lot of times at the trade deadline, guys that are available are guys that either cost a ton, either in draft capital, or they cost a ton in money, and they just want to get the money off the books. These are guys that are able to find somebody on the market by scouring the market and looking at so many different options that you finally come in and you go, well, should we spend the ton and get the better player that's going to cost us more? Or do we go ahead and just go with a guy we think we can bring in? He's already in his early 30s. He's not going to be a long-term, but we're giving up a 5th and 6th. I feel fine with that. So we'll get a 7th back too. So we're really only losing 1 draft pick overall. That 5th is basically what we're going to lose, but we say 6th and 7th is kind of in that same range.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when you talk about that value for it, I think that's a huge value move for a Lions team that is on the rise and playing really good. You need to replace him. You put a body in there, but it's also a value body, not, risking everything, hoping that this turns out to be great.
No, that's a great point. And you're right. That's even, what makes Brett Veach and Brad Holmes 2 of the best GMs in the NFL too. And Jerry Jones, why people question, right, whether Jerry Jones is a good general manager, because I don't know if that Jonathan Mingo deal, I don't know if you got that type of requisite value in return with that deal. Now, you may get it later on, but like you said, initially, when the initial trade is made, you can already see the value that the Kansas City Chiefs, the value that the Detroit Lions got in return for those deals. Like, you didn't have to wait to see, I seen them extract value from that transaction. Okay, I see it. And for the Cowboys, maybe there is a lot of value in that Jonathan Mingo deal. You get 2 years of control over him, contractual control. He has a really high ceiling as a second-round pick, but we won't be able to determine whether there was value extracted from that transaction until like 2 years from now. And honestly, right now, the predictions are there's no great value for the Cowboys in that deal. That they overvalued him as a prospect and spent too much draft capital and miscalculate the wide receiver market.
Because
to your point,
the basic Mingo of everything, I keep trying to figure out more and more about Mingo because we just haven't seen much of him. He's on the Panthers. You don't see much about the Panthers. Is that he's supposed to be, coming out of college, a big yak receiver.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be a yards after catch guy. And so his average routes are really short. He runs pretty short routes, but they're expecting him to get yards after catch. And in the NFL, he just has not.
Yeah, worked in college, right?
Worked in college, but he has not been able to evade the NFL defenses like he was in college, or overpower, or any of those things. So that's your big problem so far. Is it's not a thing of him catching the ball necessarily. And it's not even really about him getting open, because that's not how he's been used. It's about him getting space short and then being able to make plays with the ball in his hands, and he just hasn't been able to do that at all for Carolina. So even if you say it's a quarterback, normally those quarterbacks can still complete short passes, but if you're not open, why are you going to throw it to a yak guy who's not open? Because that means no yardage.
Yeah, I saw some people saying coming out of college they wanted him to kind of be a Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
All right, kind of a light Deebo Samuel light kind of guy that can, like you said, be a yak daddy for you, make some of those tough yards, throw it out to him on wide receiver screens, tunnel screens, bubble screens, that kind of thing. So I haven't watched a lot of Jonathan Mingo, but if that's the case, yeah, I mean, if you're the Cowboys, man, if he's not necessarily elite in that aspect at the NFL level, then I hope they're teaching him how to be a precision route runner and create separation down the field, because even Deebo doesn't do that well. Like Deebo, even now as an all-pro, Deebo does not beat man coverage, elite man coverage down the field and create separation. That's not how he wins. That's not how he's utilized, and he shouldn't be weaponized in that way. So my point, if he's going to be that kind of guy, you better make sure you hit on him, because that means he's not necessarily a receiver that is good at creating separation down the field.
Yeah.
And so if now his skill set doesn't translate to the NFL level as being that Deebo guy, then what did you get? What did you get? Like, what did you get? You didn't get a guy that can be a yak daddy like a Deebo. You didn't get a guy who can create separation down the field as a precision route runner. You just got a raw prospect, pretty much, at wide receiver.
Yeah.
And maybe a failed experiment there. That's the concern for the Cowboys. Because I'm with you. The little research, I saw a lot of Deebo Samuel comparisons coming out. I was like, interesting. Huh. Is he that kind of guy? And maybe he was in college. But yeah, that's got to translate to the league.
Yeah, his yards after catch versus expected, his number for that is bad. It's bad. It's like negative 347 yards. Bad.
Yeah, like
that's what you do basically with league average of you catch that ball, how many yards after catch you're supposed to get. He never gets there. So it's scary when you look at it, and you can say, the bad quarterbacks, but other wide receivers have done better in that situation. Even a guy like Adam Thielen, who's kind of a red zone guy at that point, had better stats and looked better than he did there. So I just don't get the trade at all. I don't know if maybe it's a thought of in these next few weeks, use him more in a screen game or where you're going to put him. I just don't know what the game plan is. And then I don't get it when you have a lame duck coach trading for a project.
Yeah. No, the truth is he just hasn't been good.
Especially a specialized one like that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And you brought the point yesterday. Well, what if you end up changing offensive systems anyways? You're going to have him just learn this system this season and then change systems next season when you fire Mike McCarthy.
And then the more you look into
it, help his development.
That he's a specialized kind of talent. So if you say he's a special kind of talent, well, the new guy comes in and he goes, well, I don't want him.
Yeah, he's like, not for my system. He doesn't fit my system at all. And yeah, I mean, he's just basically been one of the least productive receivers in the league. Period. Forget about where he was drafted. Forget about projections of the comparison to Deebo, whatever it was. He's among 92 receivers with 400 plus routes run since last season. He ranks 85th in yards per route run out of the 92 receivers with 400 plus routes run since last season. So he can obviously get better, and the hope is that he will. But what you spent for him, getting back to the conversation that Patrick was bringing up earlier about the value, gave up a 4th-round pick for him. You actually have, man, you've hit on your 4th-round picks. Your 4th-round picks are pretty valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, Dalton Schultz is a 4th-round pick, and Jake Ferguson was a 4th-round. Dak Prescott was a freaking 1st-round pick. You've had, since 2016, you've drafted 4 Pro Bowlers in the 4th round. And you've kind of squandered the last 2 because Trey Lance, that experiment's not going to work, even though I supported that move. He's quarterback, so you got to roll the dice at quarterback. It's worth it if you hit.
And I'll take the L on that one. I'll say I was wrong, that I thought they had a plan and were going to use him in some sense, so they haven't done anything with him, so not great.
Not your fault they didn't have a plan. You assume like, oh, they're gonna spend a 4th on him. They got a plan. You were just wrong. You gave them too much credit.
Yeah.
They had a plan. Like, nope, they didn't have a plan. You just traded for him. Like, let's do it. Let's make a splash. Why not?
Let's get a specialty kind of player, and then for a 4th-round pick, and then never do anything with him. All right, well that backfired. What should we do? I don't know. Let's get a specialty kind of player with a 4th-round pick. It'll work this time.
I remember us we were speculating and hypothesizing he's gonna be a 2-point conversion weapon, and they're gonna use him on short yardage. They got a plan for him. It's like they didn't do anything. They didn't do a damn thing.
He doesn't even suit up.
He's
the emergency 3rd stringer.
Yeah. I was wrong. Yeah, but like I said, your assumption made sense that they got something up their sleeve. The NFL, they better look out. Nope, turns out it's nothing to see here. But what they gave up, right? They gave up a 4th-round pick, and DeAndre Hopkins went for less. Deontay Johnson, as you mentioned, he went for less. So the value of
value. That's where you look at it and say, I don't know about a value. If you gave up a 6 for him, then I'm fine for the project. Totally fine for it at a 6. Think that's a great. You know what? You brought in a young guy. Let's see if he tries out. You're taking a waiver on a 6th-round pick in the draft anyway. Totally great trade.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily the person, it's just a 4th-round pick, as you just said, that you can still get Pro Bowlers in the 4th round.
You've done it. I mean, that's you have done it. It's one of your most productive rounds in the draft. And yet the last 2 years, you've pretty much given that pick away. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I love this. I don't love this stat, but it's one of those stats that also doesn't reflect well on the trade for the Cowboys. Among 72 wide receivers with at least 50 receptions since the start of last season, Jonathan Mingo ranks 72nd among 72 wide receivers in receiving yards, 71st in yards per route run, and 72nd in catch rate. It really is at this point, it's kind of laughable. It's like, what were they thinking with this trade? That is, and how could they not, as Patrick mentioned, get a 6th-round pick or something like that, or send a 6th-round pick or a later round pick in exchange for Mingo. All right, there you go. So some breakdown of the NFL trade deadline. We come back. We'll talk more NFL, actually. I've been reading about the upcoming draft, and apparently this position is supposed to be the deepest position group in the upcoming draft, and there's a connection to the Longhorns. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the Longhorns a little bit. I want to talk about the maybe the most explosive weapon right now for the Longhorns on offense. And we don't talk enough about this guy, but the numbers don't lie. We'll get into that and more right here on the Rodcast, featuring Patrick Davis and Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Babers coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get to some, time to get behind. Get to Rod's rant. But we're kind of going to talk some Texas football, so kind of feels like behind the burnt orange curtain. But I saw this stat about Gunnar Helm. First of all, congrats to Gunnar Helm because he made the Mackey Award semifinalist list, which means he's got a really good chance to be a finalist for the award for the best tight end in the country. So I was doing some research on Gunnar Helm. And it turns out right now, Gunnar Helm is top. You go look at SEC stats, SEC receiving stats among pass catchers. So that includes wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. But guys, he's top 10 in 20-plus yard receptions. As a matter of fact, if you look at, he's got 10 20-plus yard receptions on the season. And the leader in the SEC is at 15. So he's the most, if you look at just explosive receptions, he's the most explosive tight end in the SEC. As a matter of fact, he's got more 20-plus yard receptions than any Texas receiver. Who would have had that on their bingo card if I'd have been like, at this point in the season, did you have Gunnar Helm with more 20-plus yard receptions than any other player on the Texas roster? There ain't no way. But he's been fantastic. And he's done it in a variety of ways too, right? He's done it by essentially mossing a couple of guys. I believe we had one in the Oklahoma game. There was one in the Georgia game. And I believe he had one of those in the Vanderbilt game where he just goes up over the top of a defensive back and it's not a great throw. And he just goes up and mosses a dude.
Well, because remember the trick play.
The double pass.
Right? Where he just goes up and it's a terrible pass and there's two defenders and he just goes up and takes it.
It really was. We don't talk about it, but he shouldn't have thrown it. I don't even know why the criticism should be, man, you should. It was like three defenders around and he went up and high pointed over all of them. And he did it in the Georgia game. There was one over a defender in the Georgia game. It was a bad throw. And I think Quinn I'm just giving my guy a shot. I think he just had that kind of trust in Gunnar, and Gunnar went up and just made the play. So he's done it that way. And then we've seen the yak yards. We've seen him hurdling guys and defenders with yak yards. So he's not just done it as a down the field threat or as just a yak threat. He's done it both ways. And it kind of reminds me of JT Sanders, right? It's crazy to say that, but JT was the same way. Where JT wasn't just one way that JT was going to beat you. He could beat you with those screens as a yak guy, or he could beat you, down the seam as a receiver that was, threatening the defense vertically. And, I'm starting to think about tight end at Texas. And Sark has said time and time again that tight end is the second most important position in his offense behind quarterback. And he sticks with that too. And I think the reason is because it adds balance to the offense. And also at tight end, it allows him to embrace the spread ideology without abandoning the power philosophy. Like he still wants to have that balance of power and the speed of the spread, but the power of the run game and bully ball whenever he wants to play it. And the tight end is key there. As a matter of fact, looking to the future, I don't know. It seems like Sarkis is sort of leaning more toward 12 personnel, one back, two tight ends. We'll get to that, but JT Sanders right now balling in the NFL. It's one of the best tight ends in the league. Texas got two tight ends in the league right now. JT Sanders and Jeff Swaim, I believe, are the only two tight ends they have in the league. And I don't know how long Jeff Swaim's going to be there. He's been there for a while already. So good for him. But in a couple of years, it'll be just JT Sanders. But Gunnar Helm is already working himself into being a mid-round pick at tight end, which is really impressive because that is not a premium position. But JT Sanders over the past month, guys, 23% target per route run and 2.4 yards per route run. Right now, he's playing at a top 10 level for tight ends in the league right now. I don't know if that's going to continue, and he's a starting tight end for the Panthers. But think about it. At one point here at Texas, after the Bo Scaife, David Thomas, Michael Finley run of tight ends, tight end becomes an endangered species on the 40 acres, damn near extinct on the 40 acres. We go years without a real five-tool tight end. Yeah, you have your Jeff Swaim and Tyrone Swoops was throwing there a little bit. But for the most part, Texas could not produce an elite five-tool tight end. And then Sark comes in and says tight end is the second most important position in his offense behind quarterback. And we know he plans to develop a pipeline, all right, at the quarterback position. Quinn get drafted, then Arch get drafted, and so on and so on. And he's already building, that that room with elite quality talent, right? Stockpiling that room with great talent. Same thing could be happening at tight end for Texas, developing a pipeline, because Gunnar Helm's going to get drafted in the middle rounds of the NFL draft, and right now looks like one of the better tight ends in the country. The Mackey Award semifinalist nod lets you know that. And then you start looking at the future at tight end. They got this stud, Nick Townsend, in this recruiting class, 2025. He's a monster at tight end, like just a beast. Go back and watch a film on him, monster. And then they got they got two tight ends in that class. Amari Winston's another one. And then they got this kid, Michael Terry, who from San Antonio. He's not committed to Texas like Amari Winston and Nick Townsend, but a lot of people believe that he's going to be a Texas lean. Now he's an athlete, can play quarterback, running back, punt it, played wide receiver, tight end. Dude plays all over the field. Just an absolute freak of a football player. But Sark is starting to recruit, and he's starting to bring in these big hybrid athletes that can play tight end. Now, Michael Terry wants to play wide receiver, and who wouldn't, right? I mean, that's the $30 million a year position. There are more players making 30 plus million at wide receiver in the NFL right now than every position except for quarterback, right? So he's probably going to want to play wide receiver, but his body type, he looks more like he'll, evolve into and grow into being a tight end. And hell, that could end up being, if he does commit, like 3 tight ends in this class. That would say that's an emphasis on tight end. And you got the kid Jordan Washington, who we all like, is a really good player, and we got a chance to see him in the spring game. Tight end is changing and is evolving on the 40 acres right now, guys. Just say heads up. And when Gunnar Helm gets drafted, then you'll end up with 2 to 3 tight ends in the league. And I think the guys coming behind Gunnar Helm are freakier than Gunnar Helm and JT Sanders were. They're a little bit freakier physically than those guys were. And so that's something to watch, is that and Sark's been leaning. I brought this up earlier this season. He's been leaning more toward 12 personnel this year. Also played more 12 personnel. We just saw Amari Nyblack for the first time in that game versus Vanderbilt, in addition to Juan Davis and Gunnar Helm. And they've been playing less of the Big 11, Big 12, which is the extra offensive lineman. Thought they would use that more, but they've been leaning more towards just getting to 12 personnel, which is Sark's favorite personnel behind 11 personnel, which is one back, one tight end. So to me, I think you're starting to see Texas really evolve as an offense. And I think you're starting to see them lean more toward more tight ends on the field, because tight ends essentially allow you an element of hybridism. If that tight end is a true hybrid player, you can put him out in the slot like they do Gunnar Helm. You can put him in the backfield as an H-back. You can put him in the backfield, sometimes a full back straight up. They do that with Juan Davis sometimes. You can put him as a flex tight end, put him in line as a tight end. So much you can do with those guys if they are truly 5-tool tight ends, and they have the ability not only to threaten teams in the passing game, but can be adequate blockers too. I think that's what Sark is going for. I feel like in 2 years, when we're talking about Texas, I wouldn't doubt if they're 12, if they're just an 11 personnel, 12 personnel pony package team. And they have essentially one of the best tight end rooms in the country, and a culture of developing NFL tight ends, which, like I said, it's rare here in Texas. We hadn't experienced this in a long time. Going back to the Bo Scaife, David Tumricher, Michael Finley run. I believe we might be on right now in the midst of, or maybe at the start of, one of those runs for the tight end position, which, like I said, endangered species, borderline extinct on the 40 acres for damn near a decade, and now looks like it's flourishing. One of the best groups in the country. All right, let's go. That's the Raj rant of the day. I got a couple other rants I want to get to, but we'll save those for next hour or the hour after that. We still got some time here. We come back, we'll get into what the facts, what the stats. Always got great factoids to share with you. This time from the NFL level. Got a few from the college level as well. All that and more right here on the Rodcast, featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis, coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time for what the facts, what the stats. Got a few of these to share. We talked about the NFL trade deadline that passed yesterday. You had, I believe it was 18 total trades, says Pro Football Network, which between the October 1st and the NFL trade deadline, which is the second most they've had in NFL history. But every team, how about this one? Every team still owns their first round pick for the 2025 draft as the trade deadline has passed. The last time that happened was the 2001 trade deadline for the 2002 NFL draft. It's the last time we got to the trade deadline and every team still had their first round pick. Usually doesn't happen that way. So there you go. So that could be good. Maybe that's looking at a new trend where the first round picks now starting to be valued more in the NFL. Remember how the Rams went through the FDM pick stage, and a lot of teams were copying that blueprint and deciding kind of the NBFication of the NFL that actually draft picks were overvalued. At least the high draft picks were overvalued. Now you may get a kind of a switch back. Team starting to kind of flip the script on that.
At least keep the value until the draft class comes out, and then everybody can get excited about people, and then you can go, oh, now this pick's worth something, because it kind of the unknown first versus what the known first is maybe worth more. So playing those odds, it makes sense in a world of, unless I'm getting, because again, we go back to value and what can I get that's actually worth what a first round pick can do for my franchise.
If you hit on it.
Yeah.
You hit on it. It's depending on the position too. Oh man. And well, even the I would say the Lions, they've been hitting on, even they're not premium positions, but they're one of the great examples of that man, if you can just hit on a couple of those first round picks, you can really transform the entire organization within a couple of years. The Lions were, I mean, I don't know if you have a more downtrodden, I'm sure the Browns in that conversation, but they were as downtrodden of a franchise as you could get. And it took Brad Holmes, 3 years, pretty much, to turn them into a juggernaut on the NFC side of things. So you're right about that. If you value the picks and you hit on them, it could be huge for you to turn around the franchise quickly. All right, another factoid here, and what the stats. The Chiefs lead the NFL in third down conversion rate on the season. One thing they're really good at, 54% through that actually Mahomes' last touchdown in that game last night. That's not just the best rate this year. It is the best third down conversion rate through 9 weeks since 2011. So the Chiefs' third down is going to be a problem, especially now with DeAndre Hopkins. Another factoid here in what the stats. How about this one? Nico Collins ranks right now, and we don't know Nico Collins' status. There are a lot of people believe that he could be available to play, but DeMeco Ryans' history says that he does not rush players because he's a player himself. He doesn't rush them back from injury because he's more fearful of re-injury and those setbacks than he is of injury, because he knows that's part of the game. But he believes re-injury is more in control of the organization, the training staff, and a lot of times he's trying to push guys themselves not being responsible in how they approach the injury and recovery. But even with Nico Collins having been out for the last 4 weeks, he is still top 15 in YAC, receiving yards per route run, explosive plays, EPA on targets, explosive reception percentage, longest reception, percent of teams receiving air yards, and receiving first downs. And he hadn't played in a month. That's how dominant he was to start the season. And that's why he was leading the NFL in receiving to start the season. If he picks up where he left off, I think a lot of the issues for the Texans, they still exist, but they won't be as glaring because that connection between CJ Stroud and Nico Collins can solve a lot of your problems. Rush attempts of at least 15 plus miles per hour. You'd be surprised what players have the most rush attempts. This is from Next Gen Stats. The most rush attempts through week 9 of at least 15 plus miles per hour. Number 1, Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has more runs of 15 plus miles per hour than any player in the league. As a matter of fact, his lead over second place is 12 runs. He's got 48 runs of 15 plus miles per hour. And second place, Bijan Robinson has 36. Derrick Henry's got 35. Alvin Kamara's got 34. Lamar Jackson's got 34. Good Lord. The Ravens got 2 guys in the top 5. Aaron Jones has 31, along with Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, and Jordan Mason. And then there are a couple of players tied with 10. Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift. Hell, Bo Nix. How about that? Bo Nix is thrown in that group too. So there you go. That's some of the fastest ball carriers so far this season. One more factoid. What the facts for the stats? You know what? We can do that one next hour, actually, because we'll be talking about some NFL discussion, talking about the trade deadline. And this team made a move that I like. We haven't talked a lot about it, but Washington acquired Marshawn Lattimore. That is a hell of a deal. We'll give you some stats about that acquisition, but hey, Washington's legit. Where's Washington in the hierarchy of the NFC right now? I mean, Detroit obviously is the juggernaut, but where's Washington? I mean, are they in the top 3 or in the top 5 of the NFC right now? Where would you put Washington? That's a conversation we'll have. And now with the Marshawn Lattimore deal, I don't know if they have a huge glaring weakness on defense. Remember, that's Dan Quinn building, that defense in his own image. I don't know if they have a glaring weakness. That was their glaring weakness. They had a cornerback, issue. They really did. I don't know if they, the entire defense actually is pretty sound, but they did have a corner who's underperforming, and now they got one of the best corners in all the NFL. To fix that issue. So we'll talk about that too coming back on this side. I got some facts about that. We'll also dive into the college football playoff rankings that came out yesterday, the first college football playoff rankings that came out yesterday. We'll talk about where the Longhorns sit. We'll also give you some injury updates about that Texas-Florida matchup. You got the first injury report or availability report coming out today. So we'll discuss that a little bit, and we'll go behind the burnt orange curtain, talk some Texas football, Texas, Florida, all of that and more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Babers coming back on the horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a One Artist Wednesday edition of the Rodcast. That's when my man Patrick does a great job, as always, with the musically themed days of the week. He goes deep down the rabbit hole into the catalog of one specific artist group or band, and today that artist group or band is Glenn Fry. So Glenn Fry in his many forms. Could be with the Eagles, could be Glenn Fry solo, but that's what One Artist Wednesday is dedicated to, featuring Glenn Fry as an artist. So we appreciate Patrick hooking us up there. We also appreciate him coming up with the topic for the big fat poll of the day, which is already posted at the Horn ATX. Patrick, what is the topic for the big fat poll of the day?
Topic for the big fat poll of the day: how many points will Texas score against Florida? We gave you a few different choices. Right now, 25-34 is winning with 65% of the vote. 35 plus 21% of the vote. 14% for 15-24, and no votes for 0 to 14. So no one so far has believed that Texas will not have any luck scoring the football, but your main proponents are saying 25-34, in that range where you were talking about, Rod. About 30 points is where most people have it right now.
Yeah, 30. 30 is my sweet spot. They get to 30, I'm satisfied. I don't think there would be reason to be concerned if they don't score. Like you said, you have it here, 25-34. If they score under 25 points, I'm concerned. I think if Georgia, with Carson Beck throwing 3 interceptions or whatever he threw in that game, if Carson Beck and Georgia, who struggled the first half, basically most of that scoring, damn near all of it, came in the second half for Georgia. If they can score 34 versus Florida, Texas going up against a third string walk-on starting quarterback from Yale, a transfer quarterback from Yale, I think Texas should be able to get 30. So I'd be disappointed if they didn't get to 20. If they didn't get to 25, something's wrong. But if they don't get to 30, then, like I said, maybe some of the issues that have been plaguing them the last 3 weeks, maybe they still exist. And they didn't correct or fix a lot of those issues in the bye week. But coming off a bye week, they should be focused. They should be polished. You really should get them executing at a really, really high level. There should be pristine execution coming out of the bye week, at least early on in that game. And if not, then I'd worry that maybe the issues that we've seen are just systemic issues. That's just part of now the overall evaluation of the O-line, that they didn't just have a bad stretch of games against Georgia and against Vanderbilt. That no, they are who we thought they were. This is indeed what the offensive line is, an offensive line that doesn't provide enough push in the run game, or at least an average amount of push in the run game, and that struggles in pass protection in specific with unique concepts like the cornerback blitz and blitzes and things like that. So we shall see. Big night, I think, or big day, I should say, for the offensive line coming off a bye week versus Florida. All right, that's topic for the big fat poll today. What the Texas offense is going to look like. How many points are they going to score? We'll talk more about that when we go behind the burnt orange curtain. We'll talk about the Texas offense getting its mojo back. We'll talk about Michael Taft, who has some insider knowledge, if you will, on Aiden Warner, the projected starting quarterback for the Florida Gators. We'll also dive into the college football playoff rankings that actually were released yesterday, first of the 2024 season. We'll do that after we hit the Horn headlines. So let's get right to it. Let's get updated. Let's get educated. Let's get informed with all the top stories of the day with Patrick Davis in the Horn headlines. Then we'll come back and dive into the college football playoff rankings. But first, the Horn headlines with Patrick Davis.
All right, your Horn headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the NBA, the Mavericks take on the Bulls tonight with P.J. Washington out with a right knee sprain, and Derek Lively is a game-time decision with a shoulder injury. The Spurs will take on the Rockets in Houston after the Spurs announced yesterday that Jeremy Sohan would miss several weeks because of a broken thumb that will require surgery. In the NFL, the trade deadline passed yesterday with a few moves being completed. Edge Zadarius Smith was traded from the Browns to the Lions for a 5th and 6th round pick. The Bengals acquired running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears from a 7th round pick. The Saints sent 4-time Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore and a 5th round pick to the Commanders for a 3rd, 4th, and 6th round pick. The Steelers added Mike Williams from the Jets for a 5th round pick and edge Preston Smith from the Packers for a 7th. The Ravens get cornerback help from Tre'Davious White from the Rams in a 7th round pick swap. The Texans sent D tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for his 7th, and the Cowboys added second-year receiver Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers for a 4th-round pick. And in college football, the first college football poll was released last night. College football playoff poll was released last night, with Oregon coming in at number 1, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Texas at number 5. And that's your Horn headlines.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for the Horn headlines. Let's get right to the college football playoff rankings, the first of the 2024 season, which were released yesterday. The Longhorns found themselves at number 5 in the college football playoff rankings. Ahead of them, Oregon at number 1, 9-0. Ohio State at number 2, 7-1. 3, Georgia at 7-1. Number 4, Miami. They are 9-0. They're at number 4. Then Texas 5-1. Texas at number 5 is 7-1. Penn State number 6, 7-1. Tennessee at number 7, 7-1. Indiana at number 8, 9-0. BYU is 8-0. They're at number 9. Notre Dame at number 10 at 7-1. Alabama at number 11, 6-2. And rounding out the top 12 to make the college football playoff rankings and the 12-team playoff would be Boise State, representing the group of conferences at 7-1. First teams out, SMU at 8-1 at 13, and Texas A&M at 14. Texas A&M 7-2. So your first team's out. Then there's LSU at 15 at 6-2. Ole Miss at 7-2. Ole Miss got a big game coming up this weekend versus Georgia. Ole Miss, Iowa State at 7-1 is at 17. Pittsburgh 18 at 7-1. Kansas State is at 19 at 7-2. Colorado Buffaloes at 6-2 at 20. Washington State is 7-1 at 21. You have Louisville at 6-3 is at 22, and then Clemson and Missouri both 6-2. They're 23 and 24, and then Army rounds out the top 25 college football playoff rankings at 8-0. They're at number 25. The way it stands right now, Longhorns, if you want to look at it from a bracketological perspective, Longhorns are the 5th seed, but based on these rankings, they would be seeded, I believe, 6th, and they'd be facing number 11, Alabama. If you want to look at it as a bracket, because Georgia, they would be playing in the SEC title game, but lose it based on here, and then Georgia would get the bye. Winner of the Power Conference championship will get the bye. Hopefully, that is the Longhorns to take care of business. They could be one of those teams. If not, then the Longhorns would have a tougher stretch like everybody else. We're playing 6 straight weeks basically against elite opponents, because the Aggies would be included in that too. If you make the SEC title game, throw in there too, 4 rounds of the postseason as well. So bye week could be big for Texas, but at 7-1, Longhorns just got to take care of business. I don't really think they need to even worry about everybody else, and you don't want to have, if you lose one more game, then you're going to need help. I still think the Longhorns can make the college football playoff at 10-2, but they're telling you that it's going to be tough. If you are a 2-loss team or anything other than more than 2 losses, I don't think you're going to end up making the playoffs. And the only reason there'll be a lot of 2-loss, like Alabama's the only 2-loss team right now that's in the top 12. And I think ultimately, the way things shake out, I think 3 losses is going to take you out of the conversation completely. And the loser of the SEC title game should get in as long as that's their second loss of the season. If it's more than their second loss, then I think then you could have a shakeup of some kind. But it's a pretty obvious statement they're making here. They got a lot of respect for the Big Ten, a lot of respect for the SEC. You got 4 teams from the SEC, 4 teams from the Big Ten, and that's 8 of your 12. You got one group of member, that's Boise State, making to the top 12, 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, and then Notre Dame, of course, because Notre Dame is freaking Notre Dame. They got their own rules. So they're telling you right now, SEC and Big Ten, they get all the respect, they get all the love, which means I think as long as the loser of those championship games doesn't get blown out, that's a big part of it too. Can't get blown out. Yeah, I know we don't like to think about the beauty contest anymore than the beauty pageant, but there's still some element of that because you can't get blown out if you're a team that is in that championship game of one of those of the Big Ten or the SEC. And if you're not blown out and that's only your second loss of the season or even your first loss, I think you still get in. I think it's automatic. That's what they're telling you right now. You get in because you're going to be one of the top 4 highest ranked teams in those conferences. And as long as you're that, you're in.
Yeah, I mean, like that's
can't lose more than 2 games.
Tennessee is an interesting one because Tennessee plays Georgia next week. Georgia has Ole Miss this week and Tennessee next week. So, I mean, they've got to make sure they turn on that switch again. But they play Tennessee. So if Tennessee loses their second game to Georgia and it's close, this is not a blowout.
Yep.
Then Tennessee could easily stay in to that top teams. The Alabama LSU game this weekend will be interesting because whoever wins that might be still in, but whoever loses is clearly out.
You're out.
But whoever wins could stay. So Alabama would stay in. LSU might be able to jump back in if they win that game. So that's an interesting one as well. But yeah, there's still some big SEC games that'll move around what happens there. The Big Ten is more or less set. I don't think there's really any more Big Ten games because that bottom end of the Big Ten is so garbage.
Indiana may
actually there's an Indiana Ohio State game that's there, but both teams are still going to get in.
Yep, Indiana, because everybody just keeps waiting on Indiana to lose, and right now Indiana's playing some of the best football of any team in the country. Indiana could really shake things up.
They could, but even if they beat Ohio State's not getting knocked out. And if Ohio State beats Indiana, Indiana probably stays in too. They maybe knock them out, but I think that's one of those games where, because of how they're ranked right now, I don't know if either one gets knocked out in the loss.
And then, like you said, then it's how it looks too.
Yeah, and then it would only be if it was Ohio State having to go to the Big Ten championship and then getting a third loss is pretty much the only way they get knocked out.
Yep, I agree with that. Third loss, you're done. I mean, I think they're telling you right there, you're done, which is, like you said, that's an elimination game for the Alabama LSU matchup. And man, Indiana, like I said, that to me, Indiana can really shake things up. It'd be hard for me. Now, Ohio State looks good, but man, Indiana right now, trust me, man, they may be the Cinderella story right now of college football.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I think if Indiana beats Ohio State, then it'd be Indiana and Oregon for the. I don't know. I got to look at that. I don't know if there's
tiebreakers and all
conferences and all of that going on.
Yep. I haven't checked it out, but man, I'm telling you, Indiana, they beat everybody they've played. I know they haven't played a lot of people. They beat everybody by double digits. They haven't had a close game really all year.
Yeah.
31-7, 77-3, 42-13, 52-14, 42-28, 41-24, 56-7, 31-17, 47-10. Now they haven't played one team that's ranked. Not one. They got Michigan. Michigan ain't even ranked. Then they got Ohio State. They got Ohio State on the 23rd of November. That'll be the only time Indiana plays a ranked team.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, that Big Ten.
We don't really know what Indiana is right now.
Because everyone in the SEC pretty much has to play like 1 or 2 or 3 ranked teams, and in the Big Ten, there's just so many bad teams. So all these teams look really good because you get like 8 kind of gimmies a season. It's really bad.
It is.
It's frustrating because the Big Ten is getting a lot of credit and they're playing a lot of bad teams. So
yeah, how are they getting 4 teams in? The SEC get 4. I don't know if they should get the same amount as the SEC.
No, because they're saying that those 4 teams are really good and the rest of the Big Ten's trash and it doesn't matter. But
Oregon, Ohio State, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana. I think those teams are good. Indiana, we don't know because we don't know. They haven't played anybody, but they've looked really good. Everybody they've played.
No, I mean they're falling to that Miami range now too. If Miami being number 4, and you go, okay, you're ranked, but you keep you're close in a lot of games until the fourth quarter, and then you can kind of pull it away in some of them, and some of them you're just barely getting wins. But these are not great teams that you're playing close with every week.
No.
And are you the Florida State, or are you better than that? Because are you the Florida State that went and got mollywopped by Georgia? And I get players weren't playing, but you get mollywopped by Georgia, or is this a real deal because Cam Ward's the guy? I mean, there's just a lot of questions to be answered there, but it's fun to watch. And I think you need to mention too for Texas, you go, if Texas is in that, not in the bye week, I prefer the bye week. I think most people would prefer the bye week, other
Yeah,
than,
it's huge.
people who maybe make money off of Texas football games. Maybe they wouldn't prefer it because it would be a home game for Texas.
That's true.
So it is not a neutral site game. Those first games in the playoffs, if you don't have a bye, you are at home for that first game. So that is also an advantage to be in that top tier of the teams that have to play in the first round.
No, you're right about that. And I just wonder because honestly, Miami hadn't played a ranked opponent either, have they?
No, I mean, and Clemson just lost because Clemson was up there not really playing anybody, and they played one and lost early in the season to Georgia. But yeah, the ACC is not very good.
The strength of schedule for the ACC that's not a good look.
No.
So basically, Miami and Indiana are dealing with strength of schedule issues.
Yes,
because neither one have played anybody yet. But you got to give them credit for being undefeated. They've remained undefeated against everybody they've played. But so Miami's big test. So yeah, Miami doesn't really have a big test coming up.
No,
the ACC title game will be their big test. Then
playing SMU.
Looks like it. Yeah,
because SMU's 8-1 right now. They're 5-0 in conference,
and they're the first team out on the they're 13th, I believe, in the college football playoff rankings.
And they only play a 4-4 Boston College, a 4-4 Virginia, and a 4-4 Cal in their last 3 games of the season.
Man. Ooh, that might be fool's gold. So you're not sure if Indiana or Miami are fool's gold. That's what we're not sure about. We're waiting on that, and you won't find out about that. Well, at least you'll find out from Indiana when they play Ohio State on the 23rd. But you won't find out if Miami is fool's gold until the maybe ACC title game, and then still, SMU is good though. SMU is playing really good football right now. Actually, some people are arguing SMU might be the second best team in Texas behind Texas, and they could be better than the Aggies. It's just worth a conversation, I would think, but I'll still give the nod to the Aggies on that one. But yeah, I guess the first two teams out are Texas teams though, SMU and Texas A&M. A&M just, they gotta win out to give themselves a shot in the SEC title game, which means they got to beat Texas. So no matter what we're saying, that Texas A&M game will have SEC title implications. There's no doubt about it for Texas, or it could be for both, but definitely for Texas.
Yeah,
I mean but it could be for both. We'll see how the Aggies end the season and what the tiebreaker rules are going to be for them. That's your first college football playoff rankings. Longhorns are in prime pouncing position.
No,
at this point, though, my favorite thing is that there's no elite team. I know Oregon's 9-0. Oregon's not elite, and neither is Texas, by the way, yet. One of these teams is going to transform into an elite team down the stretch here. We just don't know who it's going to be. But right now, this is a grand opportunity for Sark to win his first national title, because Texas has a good a chance and a good as an argument as anybody. And if they can play like the team that we saw versus Michigan and get closer to playing like that team, Quinn and the O-line, I really do think Texas has a chance to beat any of these teams. But the Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Williams house, Cardi B's house, Megan Thee Stallion's house, but is they got to start getting better now versus Florida and get better week to week. If we see continued regression, then Texas just will be a really good or a great team. And I don't know if they will, have what it takes to steal a championship this year. I think anybody who takes it is going to kind of be stealing it this year because there is no elite team. And that should make Longhorn fans feel really good. It's for the taking. Like, it's there for somebody to ascend and take the national title this year. Usually there's someone you're like, man, you got to measure up to this team to win it all. You got to measure up to nobody this year.
No, because everybody has talent, but no one is dominated the talent where there's not a weakness, where they haven't had a close game. I mean, even if you look at Oregon, they basically played maybe 2 big games this year. And they were both close in those. They were close against Boise State. They were close against Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And though, I mean, that's probably your 2 best teams you played all season.
Yep.
And those were both 1-score games. So, you can't say that we don't know how good Ohio State is because they don't play anybody, and Boise State doesn't really play anybody. So
crazy.
It's difficult just because a lot of these teams now don't want to schedule non-conference that are big games. Because they understand conference play is where you can get it, especially if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC. You don't need to schedule big non-conference.
That's true.
If you do, it should be a benefit. I mean, Texas scheduled Michigan. It turned out to not be a big game in hindsight.
It's supposed to be, but you're right, it wasn't. Turns out.
So
the Georgia game was your big game and didn't turn out the way you thought.
No, but make it up. You've got to win. Big one at home this week, and just keep going. But it'll tell you that it is now. Early in the season, we didn't necessarily have that same parity that we always have. That every game is so important because one loss and your season's over. I think we're there now. I think we're officially with this college football playoff poll that a lot of these bigger games now, like starting that Alabama LSU game is huge.
Yep.
Because one major blue blood school is out.
You're out of it. I'm with you. I told you these are basically elimination games.
Yeah.
These are basically right now, the last month of the season, we got playoff elimination games.
So yeah, you'll still have games like Georgia, Tennessee, where you could still see both of them getting in. Mm-hmm. You could see that Indiana, Indiana, Ohio State, you could still see them both being in. If they don't, I think especially if Indiana wins, Ohio State's pretty much golden, because even if they lose another game, they'll just be at 2-loss team, and then they don't even have to play in the ACC or Big Ten championship. So you just get a bye week, and they have to go in the playoffs. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and we see our first playoff run. But yeah, it's interesting looking at these now and seeing the back end of it, because there's those 2-loss teams that are in there, and we're going to get to those conversations as we get to the end of the season. Do they deserve to be in there? And at least the SEC can say they're straight to schedule.
Yeah, no, I straight to schedule. And Oregon, you're right. Oregon at least passed the win over number 2. They got a win over number 20, Illinois. They played them a couple of weeks ago. And Boise State wasn't ranked, I don't think, when they played them, but Boise State's ranked now.
Yeah.
So they got wins over 3 ranked teams. That's respectable right there. It's respectable. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of teams have yet to prove whether they are legitimate yet. And I think that's going to come down the stretch here. And for some teams, like we just talked about, for Miami, for Indiana, you may not get that shot until they play in the postseason, until they get to the championship game. All right, there you go. That's the college football playoff rankings. Longhorns ranked number 5 in those first college football playoff rankings. We come back. We'll go behind the burnt orange curtain. We'll talk about Texas. I want to talk, first of all, Michael Taft has some insider information on the projected starting quarterback for the Florida Gators. There's an injury update for Florida, which I think will play a huge role in, or at least it'll be a huge determining factor in how Texas decides to defend this Florida offense. We'll dive into that a little bit. How does Texas get their mojo back on offense? Sarkis talked about it. He's the one that used that term. All right. How do they get their mojo back? We'll discuss that a little bit too coming up. All of that and more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Babers coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get into some Texas football conversation and go behind the burnt orange curtain. I got a couple of topics that I want to get into here. I think we got time to hit all of them. I want to start out talking about the Florida Gators and net matchup the Longhorns have this week. We've talked about how they've been hit really hard with the injury bug coming off that game versus Georgia. They're just going to be beat up coming into this game versus Texas. They're going to have Aiden Warner, who is a walk-on transfer from Yale. He's going to be starting, or at least he's projected to be the starting quarterback for them with the injury to DJ Lagway. That's something that, is really going to limit their offense. But we don't know a lot about him. So I guess the advantage could be that there's not a lot of film out there on him, especially with this Florida offense. The element of mystery is advantageous to Florida here. Sark was even asked about, how you prep for a quarterback, without having a lot of film on him, which they don't have on this young man, Aiden Warner. And Sark, paraphrasing, essentially said, well, you prepare for the scheme. Right, you prepare for the scheme, and you don't have the scouting report on the player and how they operate the scheme, but you know how to defend the conceptual signatures from the scheme itself. So that's what they're gonna, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on this week and start breaking down some of the X's and O's in this Texas Florida matchup. But right now we're getting to know the Jimmies and Joes, and Aiden Warner, he'll be the number one Jimmy or Joe for Florida at the quarterback position. And turns out Michael Taft's been doing his due diligence. Trying to figure out, as much information as he can about Aiden Warner. And like I said, there's a mystery, kind of a mystery surrounding him just because you don't have a lot of film on him. Well, here's what Michael Taft said earlier this week when he spoke to the media. He said, Warner played at Yale last year. My best friend is a guy by the name of Ryan Lindley. He was one of their best receivers last year at Yale. Ryan wore number 16 for Jackson, just like I do, and Aiden Warner wore number 15 at Yale, so they were locker buddies. I'm going to get the whole scoop from Ryan here come Wednesday or Thursday, but he did say he talked with his friend Ryan briefly about Aiden Warner, but I think he's going to get like the thorough scouting report, right? Actually break down the tendencies, strengths, weaknesses. He's going to get that either today or tomorrow, maybe tomorrow or Friday, he said. But then he said, I talked to Ryan yesterday about Aiden, and he said he can sling it. He said his arm's phenomenal. He's a competitor. He's a really good football player. He's built for that moment. He wants to play big time football, and that's his opportunity. So it's going to be cool. So he's saying he can sling it a little bit. I did not see that when he faced off against Georgia, but I will say Georgia's defense can put you in a blender, and Kirby Smart, hell, he made Quinn at times look like he couldn't throw the football very effectively down the field. So that could just be a Georgia defensive thing. But so maybe we're underestimating Aiden Warner. I will admit the element of mystery is something that maybe Florida can use early on, because you just don't know if you can open up the offense of Aiden Warner, and maybe they can. Maybe him getting the first team reps, maybe him practicing with the first group. They'll have a game plan specific to his unique skill set, and then we'll see them surprise Texas. But Georgia's defense is legit. It's one of the best in the country. But so is Texas defense. Texas defense is a top 5 defense in the country. They still think they're top 5 passing defense, top 5 scoring defense, top 5 total defense. I think the only thing I think rush defense, they're like top 20 in rush defense. So maybe they can run the ball on Texas. And that's something to keep in mind. I don't know the status of Montrell Johnson. Montrell Johnson was the lead back for Florida when they started the season. Really good running back for him. I think actually is a guy that potentially can end up playing on Sundays. Like he's really good. And Florida may have the best stable of running backs that Texas played this year. I know Trevor Etienne was really good, and we saw him make some cuts, set Texas defense up, and make some NFL type cuts against Texas when they played Georgia. So he's really good. But in terms of the depth at that position at running back, they're front line guys in NFL guy, but I don't know if they have the depth that Florida does right now at running back. Florida's running back group, like to me, may be one of the best if Montrell Johnson plays. It's a big if buts, candies, and nuts. If he plays, last time he played, he was averaging over 5 yards per carry. did not play versus Georgia. I don't think he's been available the last couple of weeks dealing with the injury. Something tells me that he's going to play. And I believe one of the sites that I looked at, they said they were pretty sure that Montrell Johnson was going to be available for Florida. If that's the case, they'll have Montrell Johnson, Jaden Baugh, and Jacoby Jackson, who have taken on the duties, their most of the burden of the running game since Montrell Johnson's been out. And Jaden Baugh is averaging over 4.6 or around 4.6 yards per carry. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season. They don't use either of these guys, Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson, as a receiver. But as a runner, Jacoby Jackson's averaging 5.7 yards per rush. And so if you add Montrell Johnson to that mix, that is one of the best, if not the best running back group that Texas will have seen this year. So I think that could be something that poses an issue for Texas. Just having that many fresh bodies at running back and an offense that does have SEC bodies on the offensive line and maybe can provide a push and just try to run downhill. So like a downhill running game with Aiden Warner at quarterback. So that's something to look at. I think Montrell Johnson will play, and I think that's something that Florida could, throw out there and present some problems to Texas. They won't have the services of Eugene Wilson III. He is, in my opinion, watching film, their most explosive wide receiver. Now, he's only played in 4 games this season because he got hurt early on in the season and was averaging almost 14 yards per reception. But he's a dude, or at least he was a dude for them this season. But he's going to be out for this game, season-ending surgery. Elijah Badger is the other guy to watch. He can stretch the field. And I think if they combine downhill running game, power running game with Montrell Johnson, Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson, and then every now and then combine that with hard play action and taking shots down the field, this will be the guy, Elijah Badger, that they're chunking the ball to. He's got 24 receptions, but he's averaging 23 yards per reception. Yeah, easy to remember. 24 receptions, averaging 23 yards per reception. All right, that dude is explosive. So he's somebody to watch. I think they'll be trying to get him the football early and often. I think he transferred from Arizona State, so he's a guy's been around for a while. He's a veteran receiver, so he's got some experience. Has 166 receptions in his career. Did have an 866-yard receiving season at Arizona State, 7 touchdowns. That was his sophomore year. Now he's a senior. He can go. If you look at yards per reception, and this is year he's off the charts. But he was at 8.7, 12.4, 11, and 23. So this year in that Florida offense, now DJ Lagway is probably a big part of that because DJ Lagway has a cannon of an arm, and he really brings the verticality back to the offense, especially with his ability to scramble. So they add the scramble drill in there with this guy's ability to stretch the field. So without DJ Lagway and without his absolute monster of an arm, I don't know if they'll have that much verticality. I mean, can Aiden Warner throw the ball on the run like DJ Lagway did deep, or will he just need to be a guy that works from the pocket? Does he even have the ability to stretch it out? Does he have the arm strength, the arm talent to stretch the field to a guy like Badger? That remains to be seen. But if you want to know how I think they're going to attack you, they're going to run. They're going to run. They're gonna overcommit themselves to the run game and try to pop a few, which maybe they will. Texas, if there's any way to attack Texas, it will be via the run game. Not like it's a weak rush defense, but they're top 20 in rush defense. They're top 3 in pass defense. You'd rather try to run at Texas, if anything. They do have a really good complement of running backs. And then once they get Texas committed to 8 guys in the box, the stuff in the box, playing some man on the outside, I think that guy's from Yale, so maybe he knows how to check and audible to a play if he sees man coverage on the outside. If they get what they like, especially with Badger, expect them to take a couple of shots. The other receiver that will be playing for them, that will probably be their main target, or at least one of their main targets in the passing game, will be I think it's Shamir Dickey. He is at 23 receptions, 18.6 yards per reception. So these guys they're going downfield. All right, you got one guy averaging damn near 19 yards per reception, and the other receiver averaging over 23 yards per reception. That tells me they want to run, they want to run, they want to run, play action, take their shots over the top. And I think that's what they'll try to do against Texas, to see if they can have something follow the pass interference call. Maybe they get a big play one-on-one downfield. Their guys against your guys. Florida's got athletes too. So I think that's how they approach it offensively. That's going to be a Herculean task, right? Them trying to, against a top 5 defense, bringing out a third string the former walk-on quarterback from Yale. I think he's going to have his hands full. So there you go. Also, we were talking about this earlier, the mojo, right? The Texas offense, how they lost some of their mojo, and even Sark brought this up in the last 3 weeks. They certainly have. You go look at yards per completion the last 3 games, and I'll take the last 4 weeks because Texas had a bye week there. So in this last month, basically, with the 3 games Texas played, they are ranked nationally right now 53rd in yards per completion, but the last 3 games, that number drops to 122nd. 19th in yards per play, top 20. That's really good. But in the last 4 weeks, that drops to 97th. Yards per attempt, 16th. Top 16. That's really good. But yards per attempt in the last 3 games, last 4 weeks, drops to 102nd. Sack percentage allowed, you're 60th. That's average. Nothing wrong with that. But that number drops to 108th in the last 3 weeks, last 3 games for you, last 4 weeks, where you've allowed 12 of your 17 sacks. Rushing yards per game, your average 62nd, but you're 115th in your last 3 games in the last 4 weeks, 109th in yards per rush in that same time span, even though you're 59th nationally, 53rd in yards per completion, but 122nd over the last 3 games in the last 4 weeks for Texas. So it's, there is definitely some mojo that's missing from the offense right now. And what is it? I think most of it is the offensive line. I think most of the mojo that's lacking can be attributed to the offensive line playing at, just right now being discombobulated, disjointed, if you will, lack of communication. They get back to sound pass protection, giving you a push in the running game. I think the offense gets its mojo back. Now, some of that was on Quinn when Quinn was dealing with the injury. I think he'll be healthier than he's been a long time. So you'll have I think he had a bounce back performance versus Vanderbilt. I expect a performance just as good, if not better, from Quinn versus Florida. Also, Florida's rush defense is their Achilles heel. I mean, they are 90th. I believe 88th actually in the country in rushing yards allowed. When Texas plays a team that is that bad, I want to say the only teams Texas play that are worse in rush defense than Florida is right now would be Mississippi State and ULM. And Texas ran for more than or right around 200 yards against both those teams. And I'm not saying you're going to get that against Florida because Florida's got better athletes than ULM and Mississippi State, but they do not function well as a high-level rush defense. And so Texas, if you want to be able to provide a push in the running game, this is the game to do it. And if they can't do it versus Florida, then maybe Texas running game is just average. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Because all the metrics say your running game is just average. Rushing yards per game, yards per rush, you're 59th and 62nd. You go look at broken tackles per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, outside rushes, interior rushes. They all pretty much put you right there, average. 60th, 65th. You're right there, average when it comes to your running game. And I think for Texas, that's why ultimately you go look at Texas third downs and yards to gain on average on third down. They're at 7. They're at 7 yards to gain on average on third down. That's third and long. A lot of that is because they haven't been able to establish a running game. And if a team can, smother that quick passing game for Texas, then there may be some issues if in Texas adjusting to that style. But not a lot of teams can take both of those things away. And I think against Florida, it's going to be interesting to see if Sark decides, to pivot a little bit, maybe break tendency and run the ball early on, because that is the weakness of Florida, or if he'll continue to let the detached screens, the quick game, be an extension of the running game. But I digress. Getting back to it, the mojo for Texas, one of the things I think is going to help the mojo is getting Isaiah Bond back and getting Ryan Wingo more involved. Ryan Wingo wasn't as involved in the Vanderbilt game because remember something happened in the pregame where there was a collision or something like that. He wasn't hurt, but I did think he was limited as a result. And Isaiah Bond did not make the trip to Vanderbilt, but was limited also in the Georgia game because of the injury he sustained in the Oklahoma game. And so he was limited in that game. So if you want to just look at things that, maybe it's coincidence, but things that align and track, The Quinn Ewers injury, we talked about that. That makes sense as to why the offense had a setback with Quinn coming back off the injury. And I think Isaiah Bond also in his injury could be another factor. I don't know how big of a factor, but another factor in Texas losing some of his mojo, because you lose that vertical deep threat. You lose the threat of the world-class speed. I guarantee you, defensive coordinators, they are telling their defenders to know where number 7 is, where Isaiah Bond is at all times. You have to, because if you lose track of him, that can mean a house call. He could be gone. So they're telling him you got to keep track of him. I think Wingo's in that conversation. Hell, actually, Ryan Wingo has more 30-plus yard receptions, I believe, than Bond. I think it's like 4-3. So not having those two guys, or having those two guys limited, or not having access to both of them, it does affect the explosivity of the offense. There's no doubt about that. So having both of those guys added to the mix, I think they sprinkle in a little bit of your mojo that you need. The offensive line, that's the majority of your mojo. That's the majority of your penalties. That's your push in the run game, and that's your pass protection issues that really throw your offense out of whack and throw it into a funk when you get behind the chains. You get a penalty puts you behind the chains, or you get a sack that puts you behind the chains, or you get a pressure on Quinn, so Quinn's got to throw it away. To me, the offensive line really is that is going to be kind of the genesis. That's going to be the catalyst for the mojo for Texas in this game versus Florida. So I think ultimately for Texas in this matchup, I just want to see the offensive line have a strong performance. The offensive line comes out and has a strong performance versus Florida. Then I'm thinking, hey, this offensive line, what we've seen the last 2-3 weeks, that's not an indictment on who they are as an offensive line, right? That's just them struggling with certain concepts, and then they've solved those problems, and now you can get back to playing, the best version of football for this O-line. This is a group that wanted to be considered for the Joe Moore Award. Giving up 11 sacks in the last 2 games is not Joe Moore Award worthy. They want to be considered the best offensive line in the country. Well, having an average, being an average run blocking unit as an offensive line, that's not going to get it either. Because the truth is, there are excuses for the running backs to underachieve this season. They've had multiple injuries. Everybody in that room has been nicked up. I kind of get that. I also, look at the offensive line, and they haven't had any major injuries. They have more experience returning on the line probably than any other group on the team. They have NFL caliber players on that O-line. 3-4 guys who'll be playing in the NFL on that offensive line. To me, they have the fewest excuses to underachieve here. They do. Even Quinn had the injury, so I get the injury, him coming back. I get the running backs. They had injuries. Guys get nicked up there. They lost their starting running backs. So you lost the best player, arguably, in that room. Totally understand why you're getting that group to underachieve, and why the passing game hit a little bit of a snag because Quinn Ewers coming back from the injury. I think there was some lingering effects of it. But for the offensive line, there is no real excuse for the regression we've seen there, other than SEC is a line of scrimmage league, and going up against SEC caliber athletes has been a bit of a shock to the system. That would be the biggest reason why. Because a cornerback blitz, yes, it's exotic. It ain't that damn exotic. Been seeing cornerback blitzes and bounty blitzes forever. Hell, Texas has been running them, and unsuccessfully, by the way. All right, for the last 3 years, and running cornerback blitzes. And A-gap blitz, not that exotic, guys. You've seen A-gap blitzes and double barrel blitzes in high school. Delayed rushers, not that exotic. See delayed rushers all the time. These are simple concepts. So it's not like they've seen something exotic that they are unfamiliar with in football, period. These are simple concepts that require solutions and communications. In Texas, trust me, they have those. They just had breakdowns in pass protection. What is the reason for the offensive line's regression? I get Quinn's, the injury. I get the running back position. What's the issue with the O-line again? No excuses. They don't bounce back in this game. Then we got to start talking about the limitations on this offense are mostly due to the O-line and maybe not quarterback and, running back. It may just be your O-line may be, it may not be an elite group. They may have some elite players, but they may not be an elite group together. And I think the assumption was early on, because they were playing like that versus Michigan, that they were playing like an elite group that could be the best O-line in the country. People were actually saying that on the broadcast. They were saying, this may be the best offensive line in the country with the way they were playing. We got to get back to that version of the Texas O-line. All right. We'll come back. We'll get into a little off the record on the other side. We'll get into some wacky stories from the sports world and beyond right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis and Lighttown Longhorn. Rod Davis coming back on the horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get to a little off of the record conversation here. How about this one? This came in the Super Bowl, of course, is going to be on Fox this year, and Fox has already put out the the rates for their Super Bowl ads. Wow, they say Super Bowl ads are already sold out. They sold them out
Already sold out.
They already sold them out 3 months before the game, and they got record pricing. You know what the rate was? $7 million per 30-second ad. Cost you $14 million for a minute. Maybe you get a bargain. Maybe they give you a discount, 10, 12 million
it's
for a minute.
It's sad that I can't afford a second.
You
can't afford a second, man.
You really could not afford it. No. Trust me. Me and you combine our net worth, maybe. I don't know if we could. I'm
just screaming for 1 second. Just
no. Yeah.
Can't even afford that.
That is wow. $7 million for 30 seconds. Yeah, that's crazy. Speaking of, well, we expect the Kansas City Chiefs to be in that Super Bowl. I mean, if they're not, that would be shocking. I think we'd all be shocked. That'd be the biggest shock of the season if they didn't make it to the Super Bowl. Don't we all agree at this point?
Yeah, I mean, minus injury, yes.
Yes, yeah. Something. Patrick Mahomes got hurt in the game, and he came back and was better. Remember, he got hurt in that game. People don't even think about that. We didn't even mention it because it didn't even
doesn't
really
seem to matter anymore.
No, he went 11 of 15 after the injury, after he got hurt because Andy Reid set him down for like a second, and he went 11 of 15 and come back in the game for 102 yards and a touchdown. Didn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Are we getting Tom Brady on the call in that game?
I hope not.
I
Oh, yeah.
mean, because like
Yeah.
we've seen Tom's not
they're
good.
definitely Tom Brady.
We and like Cowboys fans, I watching the game. Greg Olson,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much better.
He's so much better.
So much better. Like
It's
watching the
not
game, it
close,
was
actually.
night and day.
Yeah.
Of you just hear him and you go, oh no, this is a guy who gets what he's talking about. He's charismatic about it. He knows, gives you little tidbits of information that you don't have. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm with this. Where Tom Brady just goes, so what you want to do is when you snap the ball, the quarterback has to get it in his hands, right? And then he's going to look downfield. And I don't know why these wide receivers don't catch everything, but
no, he's Captain Obvious. He's Captain Obvious.
And it makes sense because he has zero inside information.
Because he can't, because he's part owner of the Raiders. So
Yes,
he's not allowed to get inside information. He literally, they don't allow him to get that inside information.
So the thing where all these other guys have conversations with the players beforehand and have
the coaches,
and they have all this knowledge of what's supposed to be going on so they can research the right things to be ready. Tom Brady just walks in and he knows what we know.
Yep.
And then he should know football really well, but it's hard to break down the game when you're up in the booth and trying to be fun and laughing and not just go, that's actually they lined up and he should have moved over another half inch.
Yeah.
Thanks,
no,
Tom.
with it, it's brutal. And like I said, it's not bad, but it's not special.
No, it's like for what he's getting paid to do it is brutal.
Yes. Well, that's true. In terms of value and return, he's supposed to be special. They're paying him like he's special. They're paying him because he's the GOAT. And everybody thought, oh, the GOAT during broadcast, he's going to be amazing. And we have this problem in our society. We do it a lot. We think genius in one aspect of life automatically translates to being a genius in another aspect. It's like, no, you can be a genius businessman and be an idiot when it comes to making football decisions, right? Or you can be, I always say there's a few things that turn smart men really stupid really fast. And it's like sports, women, and politics. And you're like, damn, he's a brilliant man. It's like, yeah, but then did you see the decision he made about the woman and why he makes such a dumb decision there? He's a brilliant politician, but he's an idiot when it comes to relationships and has no self-control. Like those are some things that just don't translate. All intelligence doesn't translate to every aspect of your life. And I think for Tom Brady, elite quarterback play doesn't necessarily translate. He's going to be an elite broadcaster. You're right. He'd have a better chance if he was able to be more informed and had more knowledge and got behind the scenes. I think Tom Brady would do that because
100%.
Work ethic is not a question, but it doesn't seem like that elite knowledge that he has, because he's still got a wealth of knowledge. He's still got more knowledge than anybody else in the booth right now, arguably, in terms of football knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's not applicable for that specific game, those teams and those players and those coaches. And so he's having a hard time trying to focus all that knowledge and then give you, the audience, to give you that, that added benefit, that added value of going, oh, I didn't know that. Oh man, it's such a great, like, that's what you love listening to a broadcast where you go, oh, I didn't know that. Damn, I never even thought about that. Yeah. I never thought about that. Damn, that's aggressive.
No, that's why I listen to the Manning cast. Is because the Manning cast, they'll point out things and you go, oh, okay, that's how a quarterback's brain works. And okay, I get that. It makes sense when the Manning cast does it, and he just doesn't have that.
He doesn't do it.
He doesn't have that. So I'm curious now, knowing Fox, what they'll end up doing is they'll go, we need to add someone else to the booth, and they'll just send Gronk, and it'll just be Gronk and Brady.
Oh, no. Oh, that would be, they would do something like that too. But you're right. Tom Brady's definitely going to be on that call. I mean, if he's not on the call, it's them saying he's not good. Yeah. And they can't say that.
They should say that. They should say that.
They can't say that. No. So he's going to be on that call. And Tom Brady might just get better. Who knows? Tom Brady will get better.
I think he would. If he spends the next 10 years doing it, I think he'll get better exponentially over the next 10 years. But I don't think he'll be better by the Super Bowl because he hasn't gotten better. He's still unlistenable right now.
Unlistenable. I think I can listen to him. I just don't think it adds it. He doesn't add anything to the broadcast. It's just vanilla. It is just as vanilla as it gets. He's not doing anything that basically a real dedicated fan can get.
Let's put it this way.
Good at that.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's unlistenable if your team's losing. He's unlistenable.
That's probably true.
When you're already kind of annoyed with the game, and then he comes out and goes, well, you don't want to get false starts. Thanks, Tom. We know that.
No, he is. He's Captain, and Captain Obvious does get annoying. It's like, okay, We know that. Don't assume everybody watching the broadcast has never seen a football game before.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how listening to it almost feels like I'm with you on that. It is like talking down to the audience, but I don't think it's that. I think he literally doesn't have anything to add.
No, I agree.
He's not talking down.
No,
he just doesn't have anything to add.
It's a very night and day thing where you can tell now of how important those meetings are and everything else in a broadcaster.
Yep. And all that stuff behind the scenes, talking to the players, talking to the coaches, and those little nuggets of information that Troy Aikman drops in there, or that Greg Olsen drops in there. You go, oh, that was, and they drop it at the right time too, like right before you're like, oh, there's the play that Greg Olsen was talking about. There it is, right there. He doesn't have that right now because of the restrictions. So listen, you want to take that ownership, because what was it, a 10% stake in the Raiders, and was it worth like, what did we decide? Was it worth like like 600 something? I forgot what it's worth. Like, it's crazy because I think the Ford franchise was worth like $6 billion or something.
It was like 10%. It was like worth 600 million.
So he's 600 million,
and he paid like 200 million for it or something.
Yeah, honestly, it's the deal of a lifetime. I mean, you can't pass up that deal. But Fox had already signed the deal with him, so he ain't giving up the ownership deal, and Fox can't renege on their deal, or they basically are telling the world, God, he sucks, and we wish we had never signed him. They can't do that. They can't admit that.
I mean, they can use him. They can use him in other ways and find something that actually, like pre-produced segments, I think he would dominate in. If you gave him time to build something that was his own and his own thing, I think he could do really well in those. I think he could do well in certain segments of breaking down plays, maybe. But in the live calling the game, I don't know if it works.
I'm with you on that, but they would also still have to admit that he's not good at it if they want to change his role.
Tom Brady have to admit he's not good at it. And that ain't happening.
And that ain't happening. That ain't happening. All right, we come back. We'll get into some other NFL news, notes, and nuggets. We'll explore the trade deadline, the NBAification of the NFL, which continues. We'll also dive into Rod's rant. I'll tell you, there's some NFL. There's some talk about the NFL draft coming up, and these specific positions may be the deepest in the upcoming draft. There's a connection to the 40 acres and to Longhorn country. We'll get into that. And is this player a Hall of Famer? Honestly, this season may well determine if this player has a Hall of Fame career. We'll dive into that on the other side, too. All of that and more right here on the Rodcast, featuring Patrick Davis. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis, coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a One Artist Wednesday edition of the Rodcast on the Hump Day edition of the Rodcast. That's when my co-host, the Ideallionaire, Patrick Davis, does a great job with all the musically themed days of the week. But on a One Artist Wednesday, he goes deep into the catalog, down the rabbit hole, one specific artist, group, or band. And today, that featured artist, group, or band's Glenn Frey, in all his many forms, either with the Eagles, independent, but Glenn Frey is the featured artist for One Artist Wednesdays. Who appreciate Patrick hooking us up there. He also hooks us up with the topic for the big fat poll of the day. That is already posted for you at the Horn ATX on X. Patrick, what is the topic for the big old fat poll of the day?
Big fat poll of the day. How many points will Texas score against Florida right now? 25-34, running away with it. 65% of the vote, 22% over at 35%, 13% at 15-24, and still no votes for 0-14. No one is going with the Texas not scoring or low scoring for Texas. But you get a 25-34. Very popular vote right now.
Yeah, that's what I figured. 30 points is where I'm at. If Georgia got to 34 on Florida, this time Florida will be beat up more than they were against Georgia. Georgia's a rivalry game for them too, so they were really excited about that rivalry game. So an emotional charge in that game. They had DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway won't be available. At least I don't think he's going to be available. They haven't completely ruled him out. But if he's out there, he's going to be out there on one hamstring.
Yeah, I saw them posting. Someone posted the video of Byron
at Doc _ Texas stood out there.
Yeah, what was it? Byron, what's his name?
Byron Leftwich.
Byron Leftwich. Yeah, on the game where he's getting picked up and carried. Yeah, that was good stuff. No, because basically they're saying it's not as bad as expected, but it's still a hamstring injury like that. If it's kind of where people are putting it, is usually still around 4 weeks,
and he still can't run with it. So you have him as a pocket passer. He's not a pocket passer.
Yeah, and I mean, we just saw Dak Prescott. When did he leave the game? Throwing a football up to his hamstring where he hurt it on the scramble, and then when he threw the ball, was like, "Oh no, I use my legs."
Yeah,
and so there's a part of it. And he's a young guy too, to risk it all to come back for a game that even in they were going to be massive underdogs.
Doesn't seem
it doesn't seem smart. And I know you hear stuff from the Florida rumor mill that they're giving him shots of stuff and he's gonna try and fight back because he wants to play. Which I mean, why risk it? Yeah, why risk it in a season that's already, you don't have much to gain out of coming back so fast and a lot to lose.
Yep.
Because you can just really hurt it. I mean, now luckily it doesn't seem like it's a tear or anything else.
But he got carted off the field. I would say
no, I get that. That's also there is something to be said in that and I know in the moment maybe they told him to be super cautious, but you also when you go, well, what's his pain threshold? You go, well, his pain threshold is he got carted off for something that apparently he should have walked off under. Now that could have been the doctors. We'll not put it just on him. They could have said, stay down. We'll get the cart. Like this could be bad. So I won't put it on the young man that he said to do that. But yeah, normally that injury is a walk off the field injury. If it is the 4 week injury that they're claiming it might be, I think it's just gamesmanship. Again, we've seen this over and over and over again this season. I think it's gamesmanship of them saying, hey, prepare for both. You better prepare. Hey, we may put it in the 4-stringer. Who knows? You better prepare for as many quarterbacks as you have to. I think that would be the more likely scenario than a guy getting carted off and then coming out and being able to be a dual threat quarterback the next week.
Yep. No, I agree with you. Sark did that with Quinn, right? Sark kept saying, I'm not ruling Quinn out. And we're all close to it and saying, there's no way Quinn's going to play. And then the Friday before or Thursday before, Sark would say, Quinn's not going to play. Art's going to be the starting quarterback. I think this is similar gamesmanship from Billy Napier. I think that's what he's doing. Yeah,
no, and then when we all said,
smart, by the way, smart move by him.
And then when we said Quinn's coming back this week, he said, I don't know if Quinn's coming back this week. It may be Arch.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do as a coach. Like, why would you give an unnecessary advantage to your opponent? So, but I'm telling you, from what I watched, and from what I'm hearing, I think it's going to be Aiden Warren. I don't think you'll even see, any of DJ Lagway at all. Hell, I don't know if he'll even make the trip.
No, I
I'm
mean,
not
we'll
even
see.
sure he'll
Yeah,
make
so
the
we'll
trip.
get the injury reports that's come out tonight.
Yeah, they'll come out
We'll get
tonight.
our first one, and I'm guessing
And he'll be on
be
there questionable
my
or
guess is questionable.
doubtful or something like
Yeah,
that. Questionable, then they'll move him to doubtful later. You're right. They'll move him
That's
to
the
doubtful.
normal what we've
Yep.
seen so far of these.
That's usually how it goes down.
I
So,
mean,
but
we'll see if they try
it's
and if the SEC apparently is going to try and clamp down
strict.
on faking
Yeah.
injuries.
Yep, I'm being vague in your injury reports too, and that kind of stuff.
They're apparently getting pretty upset with the injury rules because of especially teams like Ole Miss and some of these other teams that are a little bit faster are getting pretty upset that guys keep going down on them. I mean, well, like I said, that's right. Guys keep hitting the field.
Yeah, that has been a topic of conversation. He asked Sark about that, I think, too, about faking injuries.
Yeah, they asked him, and he's like, it hasn't really happened to us, so I can't tell you.
Yeah, and
Texas doesn't run that
I've seen some
beat of an offense.
I think some people have thought that teams have tried to have been faking injuries against Texas, but it's just when it happens, when you get a lot of injuries in a game. I don't think teams have done it to slow Texas down. I think that's usually when you're going a lot of tempo, scoring a lot of points, and then the defender goes down to try to slow down the offense. I don't think Texas has dealt with that.
No.
That's a first world problem to have. That means your offense is clicking.
There was one play earlier, and I can't even remember if it was college or pro, where a guy went down as the coach was calling a timeout.
Oh,
and it was something was wrong with the play. It was blatantly a wrong defense, and the player just basically did the fake injury, and the coach called the timeout, and you were just like, "Ooh, you got busted on that one, man." Because did
the player get up or did the player stay down?
He stayed down for a minute, but got up pretty quick because he was like, the only reason he went down was to.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it's strategy. I ain't hating on them because if Texas needs a player to do that, I'm gonna need Texas to somebody to drop down on the ground and fake that injury, win you an Oscar there or something, or an Emmy at least. So I'm not opposed to it. It's just strategy. Some people, if it becomes an issue, if it's something that ends up, delaying games and ends up, being, I think, troublesome or problematic. But I think right now I haven't seen it be a systemic issue all throughout college football or anything like that. But yeah, there you go. Topic for the big fat poll today. How many points do you think Texas will score against Florida? I think they're right at 30 points in my opinion. All right. We got a lot of stuff that we want to get to here in this hour. I want to talk about a player who potentially could be on the verge of a Hall of Fame career. The last 2 years, or at least this year and next year, could really determine or be a huge determining factor in whether this guy ends up being a Hall of Famer. I want to talk about that. Of course, the NFL trade deadline. We'll get into that. The NBA-ification of the NFL continues. We'll talk about the winners and losers of the NFL trade deadline. We go into Rod's rant. I want to talk about a position at Texas that was once an endangered species on the 40 acres, but now it's starting to make a hell of a comeback. We'll dive into that too coming up a little bit later on in the show. But first, let's get to the Horn headlines. Don't forget about those. Let's get you updated, educated, and informed with all the top stories today. Then we'll come back and dive into some of these NFL trades. But first, the Horn headlines with Patrick Davis.
All right, your Horn headline is brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the NBA, the Mavericks take on the Bulls tonight with P.J. Washington out with a right knee sprain and Derek Lively listed as a game-time decision with a shoulder injury. The Spurs will take on the Rockets in Houston after the Spurs announced yesterday that Jeremy Sohan will miss several weeks because of a broken thumb that will require surgery. In the NFL, the trade deadline passed yesterday with a few moves being completed. Edge Zadarius Smith was traded from the Browns to the Lions for a 5th and 6th round pick. The Bengals acquired running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears for a 7th round pick. The Saints sent four-time Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore and a 5th round pick to the Commanders for a 3rd, 4th, and 6th round pick. The Steelers added Mike Williams from the Jets for a 5th round pick and edge Preston Smith from the Packers for a 7th. The Ravens get cornerback help from Tre'Davious White from the Rams for a 7th round pick swap. The Texans sent D-tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for his 7th, and the Cowboys added second-year receiver Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers for a 4th round pick. And in college football, the first college football playoff poll was released last night with Oregon coming in at number 1, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Texas at number 5. And that's your Horn headlines.
All right, welcome. Thank you, Patrick, for the Horn headlines. We appreciate those. Speaking of the Horn headlines, let's get back to some of the NFL trade discussion. The trade deadline passed, and it was a successful one, I think, for the NFL. The NFL has been for a while trying to incentivize teams to be more active around the trade deadline. They want to have more of an NBA trade deadline culture. The NBA has always had, fast and furious, action packed, kind of headline filled trade deadline, whether it be the ramp up to the trade deadline or after the trade deadline. The NBA can dominate headlines in that regard. The NFL is always looking for another way to dominate headlines. And so a couple of years ago, the NFL actually moved their trade deadline back with the purpose, or at least with the intent of trying to incentivize teams, right, to be more active. And it actually has worked. The NFL had between October 1st and the passing of the NFL trade deadline, they had 19 trades. That was the second most in that time span since October 1st, second most in NFL history in that time span. The most were in 2022 when they had 21 such trades in that time span. So NFL teams now looking to make a deal a lot more so than in the past. And I think that'll continue. I think that number will continue to increase and you'll get more and more activity. That's what the NFL wants. And if you're looking at the teams who I think made the most beneficial trades that potentially could put them over the top, number one, it's no doubt. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, that trade, as we saw earlier this week, there is no trade that has been more impactful and that will be potentially more impactful than the DeAndre Hopkins trade. Guys, you think about this. That DeAndre Hopkins trade is going to make that offense, it's going to make that offense whole. All right. We had Patrick Mahomes with the worst start of his career to any season so far as a starter. Trying to, three-peat, trying to get three in a row. And that made them beatable. Now, they still were unbeaten, but at least they looked vulnerable at times. They looked beatable at times. And they still looked somewhat beatable, actually, versus the Bucs. I mean, they won the game in overtime. So that's just the way they win games now, because they win usually with defense. But that's because their offense had been so inept with the losses of Isaiah Pacheco and with the loss of Rashee Rice. But now with DeAndre Hopkins, it looks like now that Patrick Mahomes is starting to round into form. In the last 2 weeks with DeAndre Hopkins, 74% completion percentage. Prior to DeAndre Hopkins, that was at 67%. 5 passing touchdowns, only 1 interception in the last 2 weeks with DeAndre Hopkins. Prior to that, he had 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in the 7 weeks prior to DeAndre Hopkins. 82 passer rating without DeAndre Hopkins, 107 passer rating with DeAndre Hopkins. And he's activated Travis Kelce because now they got a true number 1 wide receiver. So the defense has to roll coverage. They got to dedicate and allocate resources to stop DeAndre Hopkins. With that being said, now you got Travis Kelce getting either man coverage or fewer ways for the defense to roll coverage over the top of him. So without DeAndre Hopkins, he only had 28 receptions, 245 yards, 0 touchdowns receiving. But the last 2 weeks with DeAndre Hopkins, he's got 24 receptions, 190 yards receiving, and 1 touchdown. Matter of fact, he had his first back-to-back game performance, his first back-to-back stretch of games with at least 10 receptions in both games for the second time in his career. Got to go back to 2018 before Travis Kelce had a stretch of games this productive. Got to go back to 2018. Yeah, fountain of youth with this dude. Essentially, just the presence of DeAndre Hopkins has acted. And by the way, he's having his best performance, right? He has his first multi-touchdown game since 2021. So he has found the fountain of youth. Patrick Mahomes, first 3 passing touchdown game of the season for him. First time the Chiefs scored 30 points all season. As a matter of fact, it was the first time they had scored at least 30 points in 18 straight games. It was they snapped an 18-game streak without scoring at least 30 points. So there's no doubt. And think about it, guys. The Chiefs have won 14 in a row. We don't think about it because we don't go back to last season. But yeah, they're undefeated this season. But going back to last season, they won 14 in a row. Hell, we have to start talking about at least, discussing the possibility of them going undefeated this season. And winning 3 in a row. They're going to attempt to do things here that have not even been fathomable in NFL history. They can go undefeated this season. Hell, you add the Like I said, they're 14-0. So you add the 6 games that they won last year, 6 games straight, and you'd be talking about the longest undefeated streak potentially in NFL history. They're right now, or at least on pace for that, or on that path. And to be talking about winning 3 straight. Nobody's ever done that. And honestly, I don't know if they're confident they can do it without DeAndre Hopkins. And now you're looking at an offense that also can be on par with where the defense is. Defense is a top 5 defense right now. Offense has been an average to below average offense all season. Now imagine a top 10 offense with a top 5 defense. Guys, Patrick Mahomes has never really had a defense this good in his dynastic run. It's always been based on how prolific and dominant the offense has been. And now that may be coming back. So DeAndre Hopkins, easily the most impactful trade acquisition. They tried to put Xavier Worthy in that role. They tried to push it. It just didn't work. DeAndre Hopkins comes to the rescue, and now Xavier Worthy can be in that number 2 or that number 3 receiver role. Actually, number 3, because Travis Kelce is probably going to be the number 2 guy for them. All right, so that's the biggest, I think the most impactful, most beneficial. The second is got to be the Zadarius Smith trades. Zadarius Smith traded to the Detroit Lions from the Cleveland Browns. The reason that this is such a great trade because it was so obviously necessary for them. I'll give you this stat about the Detroit Lions, who have looked like a juggernaut, but on defense, they have felt the loss of Aiden Hutchinson. Now, he was the sack leader in the NFL when he went down. He had 7.5 sacks. Remember, he got hurt getting a sack. Remember, he gets hurt on a play where he brings down, where he gets the sack on the play against the Cowboys. So he was a monster, all right, before he got hurt, having a monster season. 25% pressure rate before he got hurt. His average time to sack was 3 seconds flat, and he was providing pressure from multiple gaps. Zadarius Smith, not as dominant as a pass rusher, but he's still an alpha pass rusher. Had 5 sacks this season, a 13.9% pressure rate. So that's a significant dip from 25% pressure rate with Aiden Hutchinson to 13.9% pressure rate with Zadarius Smith. That's okay. He doesn't need to be Aiden Hutchinson. He just needs to be a guy that can be an elite pass rusher for you situationally in predictable passing situations. And that's what he can do. Detroit on third downs, money downs, right? Just when it matters most is when the odds usually flip in favor of the defense if you can get them in 3rd and long. Detroit had a 53% pressure rate, and they had 5 sacks in the first 6 weeks of the season on 3rd downs alone. Just on 3rd downs, 53% pressure rate, which is really high, and 5 sacks on 3rd down in the first 6 weeks of the season. Then you get Aiden Hutchinson, the injury to him, and he's lost for the season, and the pressure rate drops from 53% on 3rd down to 21% on 3rd down. Brutal. And they go from having 5 sacks on 3rd down in the first 6 weeks of the season. They've only had 1 sack on 3rd down since losing Aiden Hutchinson. So 21% pressure rate, 1 sack on 3rd down. That's where they miss him the most. That's where the Zadarius Smith pickup and acquisition is going to benefit them the most, is on 3rd downs. Go watch it actually, I don't know when he's going to play, but the Texans got the Detroit Lions coming up next. So we'll be talking about Zadarius Smith a little bit, depending on when they want to activate him. But that is my 2nd favorite trade acquisition. And honestly, my 3rd is the Marshawn Lattimore deal. That was a great deal for Washington. This is a team that's already exceeding expectations. They're ahead of schedule. They're leading that division right now. They're ahead of schedule. And their biggest issue, their biggest weakness was cornerback. Their first round corner, 2023, they drafted first round pick Emmanuel Forbes Jr. And he is listed on the roster at 180 pounds. And he's just slight. He's slender. And they've been picking on him. He ranks currently 199th out of 205 cornerbacks on the Pro Football Focus grading scale. That ain't good. And now adding Lattimore, you can take him off the field because he's been a liability for you. And you can move Mike Sarenstein. Remember, he's a rookie, but he's been great for him. You can move Mike Sarenstein to play in the slot. and Benjamin St. Juste, they put him at their number 2 cornerback, and then they'll put Sarenseal at the slot, and then they'll put Lattimore as their top cover guy. Maybe he'll shadow some receivers, maybe not. But this will allow Dan Quinn to play more single high looks, which he wants to play, and he won't have to protect his corners as much. And so the Washington defense is about to get a whole lot better with Marshawn Lattimore added to the mix. And how about this? He has not allowed a touchdown in single coverage since 2021. Dude's a stud. Quarterbacks have a 70 passer rating when targeting Marshawn Lattimore over the past 3 seasons. So he's consistently been a stud for the Saints. And you go look at it. His 35% open target rate allowed, 5th best among cornerbacks since 2021. He is one of the top 15, 20 best corners in the league and has been for a while. Since he joined the league, he's got the 5th most passes defended, 13th most havoc plays. That's any splash play by the defense, forced fumble, interception, PBU, fumble recovery, sack, tackle for loss. His team's total defensive success rate when he's on the field, 1st. And his team's defensive success rate when he's in coverage, in pass coverage, is 8th when he's on the field. Like I said, there's really not a downside to that move for maybe you got to look at salary, what they're willing to pay, but you got a quarterback on a rookie contract. So you got money to spend. The window is wide open. You're way ahead of schedule. And now you have nothing to worry about offensively. Offensively, you got one of the best offenses actually in the last 20 years. I'm not making that up either. I'll give you some of the numbers, but Washington's offense right now is one of the best offenses that the NFL has seen in the last 20 years. So if you're Dan Quinn, you're the defensive guy, you got to fix the defense and make sure the defense is not the reason that their season's going to get derailed. And that's what he did. So I love that move. That's probably my 3rd favorite move. I don't know if it puts them over the top like it does for Detroit with the Zadarius Smith move, or it puts you over the top like the DeAndre Hopkins move does for the Kansas City Chiefs. But like I said, considering what we've seen offensively from Jaden Daniels and from that offense, here's a stat for you about the Commanders' offense really quickly. 49% of their offensive drives reach the red zone. So basically 50% of their drives, they reach the red zone. That's freaky. Guys, that's the best in the NFL since 2000. That's when they started keeping track of it. So at least 2000. 61% of drives score points. That is number 1 in the NFL since 2000. And also over 50% of teams in the top 10 in percentage of drives to reach the red zone through week 9 made the Super Bowl that year. Yeah. I'll repeat, 49% of their drives reach the red zone. That is the best number in the last 24 years in the NFL. 61% of their drives score points. That is the best number in the NFL in the last 24 years. And if you look at teams who over 50% of the teams in the top 10 in percentage of drives to reach the red zone through week 9, we're talking about all time here, they made the Super Bowl. Yeah. I mean, you go look at it. 2018 Rams did it and lost in the Super Bowl. You go look at the 2007 Patriots did it. 2006 Colts did it. 2008 Cardinals did it. I'm going to go back and dive deeper into this stat because it's fascinating. But my point is, they don't have any issues, or at least Washington doesn't. They have no issues on offense. Their offense is fine. And I think now at this point in the season, they realize, all right, there's something that's going to derail our season. It's going to be defense, particularly a DB we just invested in 2 years ago. We drafted him in 2023, but then Dan Quinn looks at it and goes, well, you know what? I got to admit a mistake. I admit we screwed up. That guy's not getting it done. Let's go trade for another big-time cornerback. That also, to me, takes some humility organizationally to admit, we messed up something. That's all right. We'll keep it moving. We'll go forward. We'll move on. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
So those are my favorite.
There's a benefit of changing out a lot of things over there. We go,
yes.
Yeah, that was before us. This is a new franchise, a new dynasty coming in. So we're gonna run things our way.
Yeah, and it's going very well. Running things their way is going really well. All right, there you go. Washington Commanders. Yeah, it's crazy to think that that offense is just that good, but that's bad. Also, bad news for the Cowboys because I don't think you're not better than Washington. You're not even close. So you're gonna lose both of those games to Washington because Washington's a better team. And you got Philly coming up this week. We'll talk about that game coming up tomorrow. Philly's playing good football right now,
I
guys.
am curious to see the Commanders still have Philly twice. Those teams still match up twice left in the season. Those will be fun matchups.
Oh, those will be sexy matchups. Yeah, that will be fun between Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels.
Oh, I was saying Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore. It's gonna be.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, you're right. I forgot all about that one. That's even better. All right, that's a revenge factor in there and a little incestuous familiarity between those two. All right, good stuff there. All right, we come back. We'll talk about the player who is on the verge of a Hall of Fame career, and this season can really put him over the top. We'll also dive into this position on the 40 acres, which has been somewhat of an endangered species, but looks like now Sark has been able to revitalize this position at Texas. We'll talk about that too. And this may be the deepest position in the upcoming NFL draft, and the Longhorns will have something to say about it. All that more when we return into Rod's rant of the day right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis coming back on the horn. Hey, what's up, folks? Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers here. Let me tell you about my friend and my dentist, Dr. Greg Eckert. He has a great team with him as well. You know, you're only as good as your team, and Dr. Eckert's got the best dental team in Austin. And I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I initially went there for a routine checkup, a routine cleaning, and their checkups are so thorough. In fact, they found that my wisdom teeth had started to grow in sideways, impacting my molars, doing all types of damage. I was on the verge of a disastrous situation. Thank God I didn't wait any longer to go see Dr. Eck and his team, and they acted quickly. They made sure that I was educated and informed about the process, made sure I was comfortable with the process. More importantly, had the procedure scheduled, had everything done. I was back at work within a couple of days, and now my dental health and dental hygiene have never been better thanks to Dr. Eckert and his team. Now, hopefully for you, it is not as serious as having all of your wisdom teeth extracted at the same time, but if it is something really serious, you're in great hands. But hopefully for you, it's just something, maybe it's just general dentistry or cleaning, just a routine checkup. But no matter what it is, teeth whitening, dentures, porcelain crowns, veneers, dental implants, full mouth reconstruction, even root canal therapy, whatever it takes to ensure you're getting the best quality dental care available. That's what Dr. Eckert and his team are all about. And right now, because they're always on the cutting edge of the technological advances in general dentistry, they always have this great intellectual curiosity about him and his staff, always trying to bring you the best quality dental care available. They have the ability right now to give you a brand new smile in just one day. Permanently secured your dental implants. No time spent without teeth. You'll get temporary fixtures until they complete your permanent smile. And you're going to smile again and eat freely without pain or discomfort. We're talking about a lifelike permanent solution. So if you've been told your teeth need to be replaced, just call Dr. Eckert to learn about this revolutionary alternative to dentures. It's a brand new smile in just one day. It sounds too good to be true. It's not. It's just Dr. U. It's a complimentary consultation, so you got nothing to lose but so much to gain, because a confident smile can truly change your life. And Dr. Eckert wants to change your life for the better. He did the same for me. He can do the same for you. So give him a call, 512-345-3166. And right now, we're getting close to the end of the year. You want to make sure you use those benefits before you lose those benefits. And Dr. Eckert and his team can make sure you use them to do what's best for you and yours. So give him a call, 512-345-3166, dreckert.com. And if you tell him you heard it right here on the horn, you get a free Zoom whitening with any treatment or procedure you have at Dr. Eckert's office. You can't beat that. dreckert.com, DRUECKERT.com. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get into. I got a couple of topics, a smorgasbord of topics here. I heard earlier this week, actually, it was right after the Kansas City Chiefs won that Monday night game. They were talking about DeAndre Hopkins, and I believe it might have been Troy Aikman who referred to DeAndre Hopkins as a future Hall of Famer, and then it became a hot topic on message boards, I imagine, and on social media, whether DeAndre Hopkins was indeed a Hall of Fame receiver. I think he's close, and I think this season is going to be big for him. I think the next 2 seasons is a way for him to close the gap. Now, statistically, he's always been close. He's 23rd right now in overall yards, career receiving yards. He's 23rd. So he's smashed between Art Monk, who's a Hall of Famer, and Brandon Marshall, who's not a Hall of Famer. But I mean, if he gets let's just say he gets a 2,000, let's say he gets a 1,500 yards in the next 2 years. Let's give him 1,500 yards in the next 2 years. He had 12,643. So put him let's give him 14,000. He would skyrocket into the top 12 if he gets 1,500 yards receiving in the next 2 years. He'd get into the top 12. Top 12. There's only one top 12 receiver right now receiving yards who is not a Hall of Famer. That's Reggie Wayne. Actually, I take it back. Steve Smith Sr., Reggie Wayne, and Steve Smith. Don't we think Reggie Wayne and Steve Smith are going to get in at one point? Maybe not. I don't know. They should. Steve Smith is top 10 in receiving yards. He probably should. And Reggie Wayne is he's number 10. Steve Smith is number 8. Reggie Wayne is number 10. So DeAndre Hopkins has 12,600 something receiving yards. To get into the top 12, you need 14,000. I think that's where he's got to get to, and he should get there, if unless something happens physically. If he plays for 2 more years with Kansas City, with Patrick Mahomes, he should get there. If you look at receptions, career receptions, he's at 19th overall with 953 receptions. I think he can end up in the top. Now, can he get to the top 10? Reggie Wayne, Andre Johnson's at 1,062. He's at number 11. Steve Smith Sr. is at 1,031. He's at number 12. So could he get there? Yeah, next 2 years. Talking about him getting 70 to 80 receptions in the next 2 years. That would put him right there in that category to be top 12. Like I said, he's top 12. The only receivers top 12 in receptions who are not Hall of Famers: Larry Fitzgerald, who will be, Anquan Bolden, Reggie Wayne, and Steve Smith Sr. And I think at least half those guys will probably get in.
Yeah. No, and I mean, this kind of feels to me like the Matt Stafford. We say we're Matt Stafford.
Yes.
Where it is that, hey, man, your stats are there. You're right there in stats. You're right there in the type of player you are.
Yep.
But you just haven't won.
Just hadn't won it.
You just haven't won, and you haven't won it. You haven't won much because you were in Houston when they weren't winning anything. And then you went to Arizona, who wasn't winning anything. And then you went to Tennessee, who wasn't winning anything. And now you're on a team that is winning.
That's winning.
And is supposed to win more. So now in this next 2 years, where he ends up with this team, that I think is that kind of Matt Stafford. You were in Detroit, you're in LA now, you win a Super Bowl, and Matt Stafford's Hall of Fame career goes from maybe to pretty sure.
Yep.
I think if he wins a Super Bowl, it changes a lot in there because now he becomes a piece that gets a three-peat, and that lore of adding D-Hop and all of that. To me, it feels in that same vein of the story of it becomes really good, and then the story becomes the overwhelming part of, we know he passed the eye test. The eye test is easy.
And the stats test
will be there as well. And then you put in, put in that ring and the story of it, of coming through at the end and the trade for it. I think it could be a really awesome way to go. But yeah, it changes it, because if he finished out his career in Tennessee and then maybe one other team and just plays out for even like 5-6 more years.
I'm with you. Yeah, I think he's still borderline then.
Because it'll still be like 2 more teams then too. And so the stats are good, but you're like, you did on 5-6 teams.
Yeah, you're just a stat monger, man. That don't make you a Hall of Famer, because there's a log jam there right now. I just told you that Reggie Wayne, guys like Steve Smith, there's a log jam. And those kind of, well, not Reggie Wayne, but Steve Smith is that kind of guy. He didn't win, he just was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's room for those guys, but I'm with you. I love your Matt Stafford comparison. because he's got 81 touchdowns receiving. That's 31st in his career. He's 31st in NFL history there. But if he just say he gets 10 more in 2 years, that puts him at 91. He'd be 15th in NFL history in receiving touchdowns at 91, tied with Isaac Bruce. And look here, these are the guys ahead of him. If he gets to 91, which I think he'll get to in 2 years, probably surpass that are not in the Hall of Fame. Larry Fitzgerald, Antonio Gates, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Rob Gronkowski. Those will be the only guys ahead of him not in the Hall of Fame. Half of those are tight ends, by the way. So you got to worry about that category. And the other guys are going to be Hall of Famers at one point. I don't know about Devontae Adams probably will too when I think about it.
I mean, it depends on how he finished his career.
That's true too.
Because it goes into and then longevity adds in. How long are you able to keep playing for long enough that people just go, man, he was an icon for 15, 16 years.
One of the best at his position for 8 years. He defined the position.
Yeah, and he was able to continue playing at a high level into his 30s versus players that kind of fade out in the 20s and early 30s. They're fading away and they're not an elite player anymore. DeAndre Hopkins still showing he's a number one receiver right now.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I was gonna say these 2 years. I love your Master Stafford comparison. I think it could put him over the top. It could make it basically a foregone conclusion. It's not even a debate anymore. It's like, no, of course he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, because it changes into the which ballot is it debate as opposed to is he getting in.
Yep, totally agree with that. Just real quick, I went over this earlier, and you know what? I don't have a ton of time to get into it, but I will say this: the tight end position for Texas. I was looking at the Mackey Award semifinalists because Gunnar Helm made the Mackey Award semifinalist list. So I want to give him some props there. But I didn't realize it. I was looking at some of the stats for Gunnar Helm. Gunnar Helm right now is your most explosive pass receiver. He has more receptions of 20 plus yards than any player currently on the roster. Crazy to think that that would have not been on your bingo card, and that would be still probably a hell of a trivia question for Longhorn football fans right now, because you would think, it's Isaiah Bond, it'd be Matthew Golden, it's one of those other guys, DeAndre Moore. Look what he's done the last couple of weeks. No, it's Gunnar freaking Helm. He's got 10 receptions of 20 plus yards on the season, guys, and I started me thinking like he's going to work himself into being a mid-round pick. Like I don't know where he's going to get drafted, fourth, fifth, I don't know, somewhere around there, right? He's going to get drafted now. We all agree with that. And you had JT Sanders get drafted. And I was going over the stats yesterday. JT Sanders right now is playing like one of the best tight ends in the league. Like it's crazy to think, but JT Sanders 2.4 yards per route run in the past month. 23% target per route run with the Panthers. Now, nobody's watching the Panthers, but he's balling. He's balling like a top 12 tight end in the league right now. And you have two tight ends in the league from Texas. Jeff Swaim's in there, but I don't know if he'll be in there for long. But JT Sanders and then Gunnar Helm, you might start a pipeline. And to think that you had both of those guys on the 40 acres last year, and they were in your 12 personnel package. It seems like Texas should have been more effective in that 12 personnel, but I digress. If Gunnar Helm is there, and look at the athletes they have behind him, Jordan Washington, we all like, and he looks really, really good. At least he did in that spring game. I had some guys telling me that they thought as a prospect he was underrated. They probably should have rated him higher as a prospect after watching him in the spring game and how good he looked. Go check out these commits they got in the 2025 class guys at tight end. Imari Winston and Nick Townsend. These are some freaky athletes at tight end, man. Big hybrid athletes at tight end. There's another young man. He's not committed to Texas, but he is leaning towards Texas, I believe. Michael Terry, the San Antonio athlete. He plays everything: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Just one of those freakish football players that can play anywhere. And he wants to play wide receiver. Why wouldn't you? Everybody does. But his body may end up maturing and growing into a tight end. That's what most people believe. And they're going to bring him in if he commits to Texas in this class as well. Guys, they're bringing in some next level looking tight ends and who have elite hybrid athleticism. And I've been telling you guys, Sark is playing more 12 personnel this season. He's not just playing it situationally like he did more in previous seasons. He's just he's starting out games in 12 personnel. He's starting out some of the halves, like the second half in 12 personnel. Usually he runs 11 personnel, one back, one tight ends, anytime they're in third down situations or gotta have it downs or gotta have it situations. That's no longer happening either. Sometimes he's in 12 personnel in some of those third down situations or gotta have it situations. So he's changing his philosophy on 12 personnel, one back, two tight ends. And I think it's because he wants to explore some more of these big hybrid athletes at the tight end position. Maybe it's a providing balance. I'm not sure, but he says it's the second most important position in his offense behind quarterback. I think he's starting to prove that with the way he's weaponizing and deploying these tight ends. First, JT Sanders, now on our helm. I can't wait to see what he does with some of these other athletes now that he's recruiting himself, recruiting at the tight end position. But we may be on the verge of a run at a golden era at the tight end position, like we had with Bo Scaife and David Thomas and Jermichael Finley with JT Sanders and Gunnar Helm. And at one point, guys, the last 10 years prior to Sark's arrival, tight end position was an endangered species on the 40 acres. I mean, you couldn't find a 5-tool tight end on the 40 acres. I mean, you had your Jeff Swaim stories and you had your Tyrone Swoop stories. Those were nice, but those were projects and guys who were necessarily elite. Andrew Beck. I mean, those guys were just blockers. That's why they were being drafted. And that's why they were playing in the NFL. We're talking about real 5-tool, impactful tight ends now that can essentially be weapons in your passing game offensively. Those are the kind of tight ends that Sark likes. You know, the Tom Herman like big tight ends that can block, right? And Andrew Beck ended up being one of those guys. Tyrone Swoops in the NFL. Jeff Swaim, not the case with Sark's tight end. So just throwing it out there, you may be on the cut. We may be on this at the start of a golden era at the tight end position where it is no longer an endangered species. Now it's a thriving position on the 40 acres. All right, we come back. We'll wrap it up, put it in the oven. We'll play Who Said That? That's when Patrick plays pieces of audio from the sports world, sometimes beyond the sports world, and then based on the context clues or the familiarity of the voice, you have to identify or recall who said that. We'll play that when we come back right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis on Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Davis coming back on the horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a One Artist Wednesday edition of the Rodcast, and we appreciate Patrick hooking us up for One Artist Wednesday. Glenn Fry being the featured artist for One Artist Wednesday, and all of his with all his many ways that he displays his talent. So we appreciate Patrick hooking us up there. There is also the topic for the big fat poll of the day, which Patrick says up. He's a man of many talents, wears many hats, and the topic for the big fat poll today, which is already posted at the Horn ATX on X. How many points will Texas score against Florida? And 62% of you say between 25 and 34. I'm right at 30. Right at 30. I think that's the sweet spot. But 62% of you say between 25 and 34. And 26% of you say 35 or more. points they're going to score. They're going to light it up versus these Florida Gators. All right, let's get to Who Said That. That's when Patrick plays pieces of audio from the sports world, sometimes beyond the sports world. And based on the context clues or familiarity of the voice, you have to identify and recall who said that.
Here, put out CBS Sports. Mike, last week Trayvon said, players are still getting adjusted or used to your scheme. When you see a play like the Mooney wheel route for a touchdown, what are your thoughts on where your personnel stands with their comfort with your scheme at this point in the season?
Again, you'd have to ask them that. I mean, it was man-to-man.
That was Mike Zimmer, and he's starting to get a little fed up too. He's like, how the guys adjusting to your scheme with Trevor Diggs giving up that touchdown to Mooney versus Atlanta? He's like, it was man to man. That's no adjustment to the scheme. You got that guy. What do you tell you? Like, that's as simple as that's the most simplistic defense of coverage there is. Man to man. They usually call it cat defense. You got that cat. That's dude. You play that defense on the street. When you play street football, you mostly play man to man.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's playing cover 2 and cover 3 on the street. And I was like, no, man, we're playing man to man. You got that dude.
Yeah, I got him. You got him.
You got him. Yeah. Sometimes you switch up. You're like, no, what? You can't handle him. I got him. You take him. You know what I mean? But it's man to man. There's no adjustment to the scheme. So, yeah.
You always try and say, I got the guy that you trying to always say a positive thing about yours, even though I got the big guy. You're like, he's slow as hell. Nah, big guy though. I got it. You ain't gonna be able to tackle him. I'll be able to tackle him.
Terrible hands too. He can't even catch the ball. Yeah, what are you talking about?
I don't even think he wants to be. He's on the sideline. I got him.
I used to always try to take the best dude. I was always where I was. Even in basketball, where I suck on the offensive end. My defensive skills in basketball, they're awesome. I'm great. I can shut you down. That's because I don't care about my offense, though. That's why, because I don't care about the other end of the floor. So I'm annoying to play against. You're like, dude, you should be trying to score. I'm like, nah, actually, I'm keeping you from getting on a fast break. That's basically my job. I'm taking you out of the equation. They're going to play 4-on-4 when I'm out there because I take you out of the whole damn play.
No, I'm going to take you out. It's going to be a bit more violent.
Yeah, I can't take you out there. I'm too small. I can't take you out there. I take myself out too. All right. Thank you, Patrick, for everything you do, brother. We appreciate it. Remember, the revolution will not be televised. I'm talking about it right here on the Rodcast. We love you guys. We mean that. Take care of yourselves, but more importantly, take care of each other. And until tomorrow, same time, same channel. Hook 'em and peace.